I'm excited we're recording. I'm excited to just exchange experiences, exchange coping skills for different things, and just give insight. And hopefully that insight allows someone in this space to grow today or elevate in some way. And I hope to elevate too. I hope to learn something today from someone.
I can hop on next if everybody can hear me.
Can hear
Sorry.
you.
Awesome. Hey, I'm Desmond. I use he, they pronouns. I am originally from Santa Cruz, California, and currently living in Detroit, Michigan. And I think that is Potawatomi land. I'm not exactly sure, and I'm currently in Kentucky, kind of out in the woods. So I'm hoping to bring, I guess, some nature energy into the space. And I'm can't really see who else. Can't see the list. So if somebody else would like to go, open it up.
I'll go here. I'm Ziba in Los Angeles, California. I also put it in the chat. Pronouns she, her, Aya. I'm part of the Los Angeles Public Library system. I'm a young adult librarian here at the Palisades branch. I'm bringing on the energy of motivation, and I'm on the Tongva Chumash territory as seen on the website in the chat. And I pass it on to June, who's here with me at the library.
Hi, I'm June. I use they, them pronouns. Like Ziva said, I'm at the Palisades Library on Tongva land, and I hope to bring youthful and bright energy. And I pass it to Lana or Lena.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Lana Patel here. Pronouns are she, her, hers. And I am currently in Oakland, California. I am so honored to be in this space. Hi, T and Rihanna and so many others. I am the community outreach and project manager for Center of Immigrant Protection, and had the honor of meeting T and Rihanna through our Emerging Leaders program. And it's so incredible to be in this space to see the amazing Transpire program happening. And my pronouns are she, her, if I didn't mention that. But yeah, something I would like to take from this space is just to be in community with folks, and just so happy to be able to share my Saturday morning and afternoon with you all. So thank you. And with that, I will popcorn to let's see, Misa, if you haven't gone. Miss Misa. If not, Shambhavi.
Hi everyone, my name's Shambhavi. My pronouns are she, they. I'm from the Bay Area, so I'm originally from unceded Muwekma Ohlone territory, but currently I'm calling in from Minnesota, where I'm on unceded Dakota land. The energy I'm bringing today is that of collective liberation and unconditional support and love. And I'm just so excited to hear what everyone has to say and to be in community today. Oh, I'll popcorn it to, if they haven't gone, Jesus.
Good morning, y'all. My name is Jesus Joaquin de Torres. My pronouns are he, they, them, and I'm so grateful to live and work on Tonga land. I'm currently the chief of staff at Pomona Valley Pride, and so I'm extremely grateful to be here and to just share space. And what I want to take away is pretty much grow and learn with each other. So I'm so excited to learn from y'all. Um, and then I'll pass it on to Jeff.
Jeff is saying that he's plugging in his sound. He's my housemate too. So on his behalf, I will pass it to Agog. Did I say that right?
Yes, that was good. Can everyone hear me? I am also calling from the Pomona Valley Pride Center and the program coordinator here. And from Tonga land, my pronouns are they, them, and happy to be here with you guys as well with Jesus. Just bringing like an open energy to learning, and that's pretty much it. So I hope we have a good discussion today. I'll pass it back to Jeff if he's ready. If not, Nisa, if they haven't gone.
Yeah, I'm ready. So my name is Jeff Morris. My pronouns are he, him. I am a guest of Charmane's, and I suppose the energy I'm bringing is support and open-mindedness, as well as IT support. If anybody has any IT issues, feel free to message me. So I live in Phoenix as well, and am Charmane's roommate, essentially. And I don't know who to pass to. Maybe Shay?
Hello, is this working?
Yep.
This is working, but my camera is not. So IT man, we will talk later. I am also a guest of Charmaine's. I am a partner with Jeff, and my name is Shay or Shenanigans. My pronouns are she, her. I am also on Hohokam land, but I am from the Bay Area, went to school in Santa Cruz, and am now in Phoenix, Arizona. I would like to mirror my excitement of what Mariah said of being in community that that centers trans voices, but not just trans voices, but trans voices of color. And I suppose the energy I would like to bring today is active listening. And let's see here. I don't know who to pass it to. I can't. Nick?
Hi, my name is my name is Nick. Um, and I'm here as a guest of Tease. So great we were in a program together and got really close, closest friends. And I'm so grateful that they have put this together and are putting it together. My pronouns are he, they, Nick, and sometimes pronoun atheist or agnostic, so whichever way. And um the energy I'm bringing is one of gratitude for being in this space, and one of celebration and congratulations to my friend for putting this together, and accomplice slash allyship slash anarchistic impulses and vibes, and great gratitude mostly. Thank you. Oh, can I pass it on to Rihanna M?
I think that's everybody.
I can go next. I think I'm the last one. I introduced myself earlier, but hi everyone, I'm T. My pronouns are they, them. I'm joining from Ho-Chin territory on Ohlone land in so-called Oakland, California. And the energy I'm bringing in, honestly, is nervousness, but also the willingness to just be myself today and embrace however I'm feeling. And thank you again, everyone, for being here.
Thank you, T. Thanks again for organizing this. I want to make sure everyone does have a chance to introduce themselves if they'd like. There was someone in here, Mike. I'm not sure if you're still here. If you would like to go. And last but certainly not least, D, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I can go. Hi, everyone. I'm Dee. I'm also in unceded Ohlone land here in Oakland, California. I'm originally from LA or Tonga lands. And really grateful to be here. I think a lot of the energy I'm bringing in is just an open heart and just feelings of growth. I feel like I've been having a lot of conversations with T about everything that led up to this moment. And so just really glad to see this actually happen. So really bringing a lot of grounding and just reassurance that, these spaces need to continue to expand. And there's a lot of expansion and really hoping to see what more happens after this. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for being here, D. And just to confirm, everyone went. I don't want anyone to feel left out. Tried to make sure I caught everyone, unless maybe you snuck in towards the end. And if not, we can move on to the next thing. I think it's so important, like I was saying earlier, that we claim ourselves in whatever spaces we're in, especially as queer folks, especially as trans folks and mixed race folks, that we are unapologetically taking up and claiming space, and also having a mindfulness in that too. So one of the things I'd like to talk about today is just kind of like house standards of conduct, kind of some basic things, giving people the floor when they're speaking, not giving unsolicited advice unless someone specifically asks, for advice or help, but really kind of just listening and receiving today, giving everyone an opportunity to speak if they'd like. We do have specifically a panel section, but even that is going to be a little more relaxed. Don't feel like you can't ask questions or can't speak up if something comes up for you. Again, I think some of these are just kind of like basic housekeeping things, but important to name. Also important to name, we are recording this session, so please feel free to do whatever makes you feel most comfortable for that. If you would like to maybe change your name, if you would like to be on camera or off camera, all of that is welcome into the space. Again, just kind of some things to remember. A concept of step up, step back. So just to have a mindfulness of the identities and privileges that we exist in different places and spaces. So I always encourage people, if you are someone that generally takes up less space, maybe you are introverted or a little more quiet, that maybe you challenge yourself to like speak into the group or to say something that maybe you typically wouldn't. And then the opposite is true as well. If you typically are someone that is extroverted or doesn't have a problem with shyness, allowing other people space to speak and contribute today to the discussion as well. As always, any space that I'm in, I encourage people to step into brave space, which is a radical Black concept, comes from some academics, happy to like credit them and resources at the end of this. I think it's important that people get acknowledged for their work. But essentially this idea that safety doesn't exist, safety does not especially exist for queer and trans folks. So to maybe be a little challenged today, and there might be some questions or conversations that are uncomfortable or are activating in our bodies. So again, I will always encourage people to tense yourself, tend to your body, whatever your body needs. If that's like, hey, I just need to turn off camera and step away for a minute, or I need to go and grab a snack and have some nourishment. We have a planned break about at the halfway point. But again, we are all adults in this space, so please feel free to take any time that you need to tend to yourself, to tend to your body, whatever that looks like for you. And lastly, for like housekeeping things, if anyone in the community would like to contribute, anything that adds to your safety or comfort, please feel free to speak that into the space. Anything that would make you or this experience on Zoom more comfortable for you. And I will be quiet for a moment and allow anyone to contribute any other house standards. Yes, confidentiality. Thank you for putting that in the chat, T. And again, just to reiterate, this session is being recorded. So with confidentiality, again, some of these things should go without saying. Unfortunately, we do not. So please be mindful of the things that people share in this space. If someone shares something about their personal life or personal experience or trauma, it's not our space or our place to go share that with other folks. Also, please do not contact people offline or virtually without their prior consent. It's creepy, just like across the board. The panelists have like been very transparent and public with information on Instagram if you would like to follow or connect in that way. I also believe there's a contact list that will be sent out if we want to connect. I generally recommend if you have a particular connection with someone, send them a chat, just like get consent to hit them up on Instagram or maybe exchange numbers. Anything else? Oh, someone asked if the recording will be uploaded. Do you want to answer that, T? I do believe it is, but I don't want to misspeak.
Absolutely. I want to say thank you, Sharmane. Thank you to Sharmane Fury, who offered to upload today's event, recorded event on their platform, their podcast platform, Militantly Mixed. So it will be on YouTube. If there's a way for us to upload parts of it, maybe on Instagram, that's something we can collectively talk about in terms of editing. But the full recording will be on Militantly Mixed YouTube. And thank you, Sharmane, for that offering.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sharmane. Just to confirm with the group, any last additions, any other community agreements for everyone to feel safe and supported in the space today? Anyone? Perfect. I'm going to do a quick something that I typically do. So outside of things like this, I facilitate mushroom ceremonies specifically for queer and trans folks, specifically for folks in the community. So I absolutely consider myself a ceremonialist and ritualist. It will be a little bit different on Zoom, but I would like to still call in the directions with everyone today. So this is something that comes from my lineage. I will teach in the way that I was taught. I will add the nuance that different tribes and different places and people will have nuance in the ways that they do this. Again, I will be doing this from the way that I was taught from my teachers and my people, actually represented here on my earrings today too. So this is like the crest from my tribe, and it's the 4 directions here, these 4 colors. And this person has like a little artistic spin on it, but does that sound okay to everyone? Does everyone consent to a quick, just like setting the space, calling the directions, and then we can transition into the panel? Does that work for everyone? Consent is like so important for me. So even just like a head nod, thumbs up. Perfect. I also want to add the nuance as well. This does not give anyone permission to now go like set directions in ceremony or spaces. I think that a lot of times this is something that is made theatrical and like a way that oftentimes is like I can't think of the word right now. It's like interesting that a lot of times people will reach out to indigenous folks and then be like, yeah, we want you to call in the directions, but not like contribute in any other way. So it's very important to me. Performative, yes. A lot of times can be performative. A lot of times too is not like follow up, is not any involvement in indigenous community. So again, I encourage you to get involved wherever you are locally. Talk to the people that live there. I promise you, they will speak with you. They will let you know how you can help and support them. Information is not gate kept in that way. Generally, people will be open and honest to share that with you. So I will encourage everyone to pull out the compass on your phone if you have it. This is something that is a great way to just kind of orient where we are in time and space. I even do this if I travel. I will pull out my compass and just kind of orient where I am in that space. So if everyone could do that, again, we'll just do kind of a brief, like acknowledging the different directions. I will tell you what they represent for me and for my people. Also not a monolith. I do not represent every indigenous person. I do not represent every person, even for my tribe. But with that being said, let's get this started. So we'll also start, we'll always start in the east, the same place that the sun starts, that our day starts. So east represents the element of air. It is new beginnings. I like thinking of even the beginning time of day, right? The sun is coming out, animals are starting to like wake up and move around. It's very much the energy of east, right? The start of something new, the start of the day, the start of a year is that that newness, that fresh energy, that learning energy. Then we move into the south, which is the element of fire. Maybe look at your compass, see in your space where south is. South is behind me. Represents fire, that heats. Think of like if you are outside, especially in California, usually you have the heat of the day at around lunchtime, around noon, right? You're feeling the heat, you're feeling passion. Sometimes south can even be associated with like that passion of love and like the fire, the burning desire that you would maybe have for a lover or for a friend. Then we move into the west, which is the element of water, also representative of community and storytelling and nourishment. Again, thinking of our day, thinking of what plants and animals are doing, right? Animals are gathering for dinner, humans are gathering for dinner, we're nourishing ourselves, we're sharing story, we're sharing in community. That's that energy of west. Then we transition into the north, which is the element of earth. It also represents ancestors. So those that came before us, those that will come after us. In this particular space, it's also important to acknowledge our transcestors, all the trans folks that came before us. Thank you for making our lives easier and paving the way for us. Thank you for your radical rebel spirits. Thank you for knowing that we're worthy enough to fight for and to birth us into this timeline. Thank you so much. Thank you for your endless guidance. And thank you to all the benevolent ancestors that always have our back, that are always walking with us and alongside us. Lastly, we're moving into the physical elements of the earth, right? So we have Father Sky, which is up here, right? It's the clouds, it's birds, it's weather even, right? Moving outside of the binary, but traditionally this is recognized as a divine masculine energy. we move down to Mother Earth, which again, in the binary system is typically represented by feminine energy. And expanding beyond that is Great Spirit, right? So that is ultimately what connects us to ourselves and connects us to one another. So if everyone could take a moment and just like breathe in your space, maybe feel where your body is, where are your shoulders at? Are they like tense and up by your neck? Maybe release them a little bit. Is your chest like up and out? Are you like hunched? Are your shoulders, concave, or are they pulled out and back? Take a couple deep breaths. Again, recognizing each of us as individuals, all the incredible things each of us are bringing into this space today. And each of us and individuals make the community whole. Every single one of us is necessary to be here today. And we'll end this just taking a couple deep breaths. Again, kind of sit in your own space, in your place. Maybe breathe in something, again, think of the essence of that thing that you said that you're bringing for community. How can you really show that, even without words, without movements? How do you bring that into this space? What's something that you can release and let go of? Maybe let go of that on your exhale. And then whenever you're feeling ready, come back, maybe take another grounding breath or two. How's everyone feeling after that? Does anyone want to share anything that came up?
Thank you, Preston. That was very calming for me. When I was taking my deep breaths, I was holding my rose quartz, and I also opened some essential oils, and the fragrance of peppermint is very calming for me. And yeah, I feel clear-headed and I feel safe. And thank you.
Thank you so much. If everyone's feeling good, feeling completely, feeling a little, maybe a little bit more relaxed, 3% more relaxed than when you entered the space, I'm going to pass it over to Mariah, and we're going to go ahead and get started with our panel.
Mariah, you're on mute.
Sorry, thank you. So I want to start by having the panelists introduce themselves. But first, I wanted to introduce myself a little more on a little more intimate level, so you guys know where I'm coming from. So I actually am involved in activism in Los Angeles. I've been involved in a lot of activism work. I'm also a member of the Equity Strippers Union, which is the first strippers union in the nation, with the exception of the Lusty Ladies. And we own we have a pop-up burlesque show that we do throughout the city. And it's dancer owned and operated. And we basically put on really cool burlesque shows throughout the city and advocate for rights for sex workers. And yeah, so I do that. I'm also a published author, and my first novel will be released in February of 2025. And I am mostly passionate just about educating and sharing my authentic experience as a trans woman with my following on social media and just advocating for different things in the city, showing up to city council meetings and being vocal and, you know, that's a little bit of my background. So now I can dive into introductions of the panelists. I don't know that there's a specific order, so whoever's comfortable with going first. I know we have Lana, we have Raina, Sharmane, Preston, Desmond. So whoever would like to go first, or I can appoint someone to introduce themselves and we can get started after the introductions with the questions and discussion.
I'm fine with going, I guess, in the order pictured. So Mariah, thank you so much for moderating this panel today. And thank you for all of your work. Hi, everyone. Lana Patel here, pronouns as she, her, hers. I'm currently the Community Outreach and Project Manager for Bolivar Bay Area LGBT Asylum Project, which is under the umbrella for Center of Immigrant Protection. And I've been in community for a long time. I call myself grandma. I've been doing this. I think this is 18 years of my journey, my gender journey, and being in transition, and advocating from my college days. I grew up in Polk County, Florida. For those who don't know, that's the largest county in Florida. And it is very regressive, very regressive, very ultra conservative. And we did not have anything queer, LGBTQ. I think they just started Pride. They might be like 8 years having a Pride now. But I was one of the first out and open trans women in the county, and I really pushed to have a GSA for my school. So it was the first GSA ever in Polk County. And yeah, to see the work that has happened over the years is amazing. Currently in California, I've been doing community work since I landed on Los Angeles soil. I worked for the LGBTQ Center of Orange County for quite some time. I worked for a health tech company called Plume. So I was a healthcare and trans services coordinator at the center, and I did community partnerships, government affairs, and PR, and as well as was the executive assistant for the co-founder and chief medical officer of Plume, who's a trans woman herself, for quite some years. And that was an incredible experience. So I've, gotten to be hands-on with community, and I get to be hands-on now in my role with Bolivar Bay Area. I sat as the vice president for 3 years, and now I'm working as a staff member. So just very blessed and grateful to continue being in community and still doing this work. We just recently recognized San Francisco being Trans History Month in August, and also in June, the resolution to make San Francisco a sanctuary city for trans folks and TGNCI folks that are seeking asylum from their home states, countries. So just grateful to be in advocacy spaces and continue doing this work. And with that, I will pass it on to Rihanna.
Hello everyone. My name is Rihanna. I use they them pronouns again. So I am a queer, non-binary, transmasc individual. I'm originally from upstate New York. I moved to California in January 2023 to continue my undergraduate education at San Jose State. I study industrial design and I have a minor in urban studies. So growing up, I grew up in one of the, if not the poorest county in the entirety of New York State. It's up there. It's very rural, very white. There wasn't anybody who looked like me aside from my one sibling. So it was very isolating in that regard. No mention of anything being anything related to being queer or trans at all. I didn't even know being queer was an option until I was about 10. And I was kind of like, oh, you can do that. But yeah, it was in contrast, I think, to Lana. I think it's funny. I just stepped into my transness when I moved to California. Finally, I found myself in a space where I could, use the pronouns that fit best for me. And it's been such an experience. There's been so much growth and development individually for me since I got here. It seems like I feel like I'm on the fast track because there was so many years where I was just kind of confined to this little bubble where I didn't really see a way out. And now I'm here and I'm so grateful that I'm, living where I am. And I'm especially grateful to be a part of this panel. So I want to thank UT especially for making this happen and, everyone else involved. This is incredible. I'm so grateful because this is really my first time being in community with mixed and multiracial queer and trans folk. Still a rare experience, I guess, in comparison to the majority of my life, to be in community with queer and trans folks of color in general. So truly, I'm so grateful to be here. And a little bit about the work that I do. I work at my university's Gender Equity Center. So I'm excited to start work there. I was just hired, but I previously worked at my campus's garden, and I did a collaboration with our university's LGBTQ plus center, the Pride Center, and it focused on an event about queer ecology and how that environmental justice ties in with queer liberation. So that's kind of the angle where my advocacy work has started to take, and I'm really interested in continuing that and maybe branching out a little bit more. I want to explore more DEI work with the Gender Equity Center and kind of angle myself towards policy work in the future, because my goal is to just, as someone who's newer to advocacy in this space, I want to use what I have, the opportunities that I have for myself to advocate for those who need it. So yeah, I think I rambled a little bit, but that's okay. I'll pass it off to Sharmane.
Hi, everybody, again. I am your Sir Auntie, Sharmane Fury, host of the Militantly Mixed podcast, which is a podcast about race and identity from the mixed race perspective, amongst other podcasts that I do by Furious, Queer Far, Matcha Masala Murder, Blurred Comics. I am how do I describe it? I'm your Sir Auntie. I'm not a ma'am, I'm a sir. I'm not an uncle, I'm an auntie. I'm going to take care of you, but I'm also going to leave you alone quite a bit. My work is predominantly in spaces that allow me to kind of help the mixed babies, the people who didn't necessarily have a foundation of understanding their mixedness or a community around them. I have 2 biracial parents. My entire family is mixed. I grew up American military, so we always lived around mixed people. And it wasn't until I was an adult that I found myself not around mixed people anymore. So I created Militantly Mixed as a way to connect us kind of globally as cousins, to, not feel unusual, not feel weird, in our mixedness. And then just discovering over time that my hybridness expanded across everything with me. As a child, I described myself as a boy girl and didn't understand that there was something to what I was saying. I thought I was just the only femme in my family, pretty much. I'm the only femme-born cousin for many, many years. And so I just thought I was like the boys in my family because there were so many of them. As I grew up, I started to realize, oh no, there was something to this. I'm not woman or man. I'm not non-binary. I am the binary. And so I want to find ways to work with people that kind of sit in their hybridness across everything that they are, whether it's your gender, your sexuality, your mixedness, what have you. And I'm also multicultural in that I have a grandmother from Japan, a grandmother from England. My grandfathers are from different parts of America. My ancestry is from literally all over the planet. And so I want to reach out to the cousins around the world and make people feel like they can be their full mixed ass selves, which is the slogan of the show, be your mixed ass self, across everything. And that's fill in the blank, be your queer ass self, be your trans ass self, whatever your ass self is. That's my work. I'm trying to help you get there. And thank you for putting this together, T. I appreciate being on the panel, and I'm looking forward to hearing what everybody has to say. And I guess next is Preston.
I'm immediately like going to check out your podcast. I'm admittedly like not a podcast person. Absolutely will tune in and check out your podcast immediately. Hi everyone, I'm Preston. Pronouns are they, them. Where to start? Currently in Los Angeles, been in Southern California for about 10 years. Started my like activist organizing work actually in college. I went to Georgia State University. And that was around the time of, this is wild how long I've been doing this. Like almost 20 years, yikes. Been in the front lines. I was like originally protesting. I was thinking about this the other day when like Westboro Baptist Church was a thing, just to like date me a little bit. Occupy Wall Street was happening at the time. So I was like in those encampments. And then, things shifted, but have been on the front lines, for almost 20 years now. Have done so many different iterations of working with queer folks and trans folks, and now exclusively only work with queer and trans folks unapologetically. That was something that like took me a while to get to, and like for a lot of my life, financial security was linked to playing like this cis game, right? So I think that I was conditioned under that, like so many of us are. And actually a few years ago, I was like, you know what? No more. I'm not working with any more straight clients. I'm not happy to like recommend you to some folks, but just like not doing that labor. Been there, done that. So that feels really nice to be. I even struggle calling it my work because I'm like, hey, I get to like play with mushrooms and like and just hold space for people having these like incredible life-changing experiences. And I really do that with as much humility as possible, of just like really holding space for people. I don't at all want to be like acknowledged or honored for that. It is my honor to just be able to sit back and know that people have spaces that are safe to them, and have ways to explore psychedelics and other mind-altering substances in safer ways that I absolutely did not have growing up. Did many substances in shady places. So now, as also an auntie like Sharmane, having this mindfulness of like, hey, how can I show up for people that are coming up behind me? So I like to think that I'm the auntie that will give you really great drugs, but we'll make sure that they're clean and are safe and have been like tested for fentanyl if it's anything powdery. But yes, I've worked again in kind of the range of like harm reduction and addiction counseling things, and just recently got certified to do peer support officially in the state of California, which is an interesting process. But yeah, really excited to be here today. Really excited to learn with you all. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so I think I am the.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Can you hear me?
It's a little muffled, but I think we can hear you.
Okay. I'll try to get a little closer to the mic.
Much better. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. So, yeah, I'm Desmond. Use he, they pronouns, and yeah, I living in Detroit, Michigan. Like I said back before, I'm originally from Santa Cruz, California. I am mixed. I'm half Black and half Mexican. And growing up in California, I grew up around a lot more of my Mexican family. So, you know, culturally a lot more tied to my, you know, Mexican identity. Now I'm out living in Detroit, and I guess the advocacy kind of work that I'm doing, I am involved in a lot of programs working with youth, like inner city youth, and doing kind of outdoor programs, doing some climbing with youth, and also kind of like winter sports, snow sports, and so that's been really great to be able to share some of my passions with kind of the next generation, um, and you know, kids who would otherwise not have access to you know, a lot of these nature spaces or not really know about it. Something that I, you know, coming from California, I maybe took for granted that, you know, there was so much nature around and it was accessible growing up in Santa Cruz. And so I think it really helped shape my kind of worldview, and just, you know, being able to feel some ownership over, you know, I guess nature and caring for the planet, and having a like direct connection. Um, so that's important to me, um, to share. Um, and I guess that's it. I'll keep it quick and moving along, I guess.
Thank you, Desmond. Was that everyone, Preston? I think we're good on introductions. I think too that I wanted to say thank you, Lana. I feel like we're not worthy to have you in this space. Just kidding. We're so excited to have you here. I only say we're not worthy because I'm just super impressed. And I think you're stunning as well. Sorry, Rihanna, for messing up your name earlier. I apologize for that. I said Raina, I think, and it's Rihanna. So
It's Rihanna, actually.
Rihanna?
I appreciate the apology. Yes.
Okay, not Rihanna, Rihanna. Sorry for
Rihanna,
messing. And I also relate to you when you said you grew up in a like a white, predominantly white town. Was that you, right? I also come from that same background and have that similar experience. Sharmane, both of my parents are also mixed. My mom is white passing. I couldn't relate to her on a lot of experiences because she's white passing. And we often had like arguments around, she very much identifies as a person of color, but she does not pass for a person of color. And so we get into it all the time about experiences and different things. And she thinks that she can relate and that she can, and it's just like, no, you can't. But So I just wanted to point out that we share that, and I come from a family that looks like all different, so we all look different. Um, yes, and then I wanted to say to Desmond, I'm just trying to relate to you all because I feel like for me, that allows me to feel closer to you and get to know you better and feel more comfortable with you. So I was just kind of picking points from your introductions of things that I related to, and I think that we shared. So I hope that's okay that I'm sharing that right now. I wanted to say to Desmond, I also take nature for granted sometimes. Living in California since I was 19, I moved from Ohio. I grew up in Ohio, born and raised. I moved to LA for fashion school. I graduated at the Art Institute in fashion marketing. And I never even visited LA. I just kind of moved because I was like, it's got to be better than Ohio, like, no question. And so I kind of like moved to LA. I found myself, I thrived. I became a woman. And then I don't know, I was very much involved in nature and loved nature and appreciated nature. And then I found like living in Southern California, I kind of started taking it for granted too. But recently I've been like going hiking more, and I've been on a couple of camping trips in the past couple of years. And so I've always found that to be healing. Um, and grateful that I pushed myself back into acknowledging nature and stuff. So I don't know, your comment provoked that thought, and I just wanted to share it. So now I will get started with the panel questions, if that's okay with everyone. Does anyone have any questions? And does anyone want to go first? I'll just, I will appoint someone to go first in that case, if that's okay, if we're all comfortable with that. I feel like I don't want to like be pushy, but you guys are making me be pushy.
We'll follow your lead.
I can be submissive, but I'm versatile, so I can be dom too. Okay, so these questions were put together by B, T, and Preston and myself. It was like a collaboration. We all contributed and or approved this outline. So I'm going to start off with Lana, if that's okay. And I want to know what and who currently grounds you in this world. And when you're answering this, maybe you can kind of channel like your purpose in life, your passions, and you can even incorporate like what you enjoy on a creative level or artistic level. And even if you want to tell us more about your advocacy work, that's cool too.
Thank you. Yeah, I really didn't share too much about my background. I am the proud daughter, a trans daughter of immigrants. My mother's Jamaican and Punjabi, and my father's Trinidadian and Gujarati. And I grew up with my mother's parents in Polk County. So born and raised in New York, moved to Polk County at 13. And it is a predominantly white area. So it was white, and then outside of white was African American and Latinx. So I just was like this enigma. I had a biracial grandmother who was of Afro-Jamaican and European British descent, and a Indian grandfather. And I did not really fit in with any of the kids. I think the idea was to like kind of shove me in with the other African American kids, but I didn't quite fit with them culturally. It just was it was different. And, you know, being raised by an older generation who are immigrant grandparents who have no idea what being queer is, let alone being trans, and them trying to grapple that, and then being in this very backwards, racist, like Confederate flag flying place was it was a lot. Um, I would say what grounds me is my ancestors. I have one remaining grandmother. She just had her birthday on the 7th, and she's also someone I think of. But I think of my grandparents and their plight to get here to this country, how my grandmother put herself through school. She went to nursing school in England and then moved to New York and then sponsored her husband and her 4 children to come to America. And yeah, you know, I think of the quote unquote American dream and her hopes and aspirations to get off of that island to like be able to provide that for her and her family. And I think that journey really resonates with me, and it always helps me whenever I get lost in the wires and I'm like, what am I doing this for? And it's like my ancestors, right? Like I'm living out their wildest dreams. I'm doing the things that they wish they could have done. You know, my grandmother got married, I think at 21. At 21, I was like traveling the world, doing things shouldn't have been doing, but living my best life. And I always just think back on them, and I'm just so proud of the work that they did, and like the ground they paved, and like the blood and tears that they had to shed in this country, even though they weren't treated the way that they should have been treated and given their just due. And you know, my grandfather had to come up during 9/11 and being racially profiled and dealing with Islamophobia, although he wasn't a person of Islamic faith. But you know, we started seeing brown people as terrorists, and my grandmother having to navigate the world as, you know, a mixed woman, but how the world treats Black women. And being in the South, you know, she fought really hard to get the just due and the respect. And so I think that really grounds me in the work that I do. And yeah, I guess I'm like the first of many from my family, like the first to, I mean, the first LGBTQ person in the family, um, the first person to, I guess, make it into like LA and Hollywood and, you know, be on TV. And, you know, I think one of my proudest moments before my grandmother passed away, this is my mother's mother from Jamaica, is when I got to do this commercial with Pantene. And it was with the Transcourse of Los Angeles. And so it was a collaboration with Pantene, Glad, Ellen DeGeneres show at the time. And the local news interviewed me, and I got to talk about my journey. And it was the first time that a Afro-Indo-Caribbean trans woman was on screen wearing a sari, a bindi, Indian jewelry and clothing. And so I got to represent my Indian culture, and my grandmother got to see me on TV. And I never thought in a million years I would get to a place where I could be like on television. You know, my family growing up, they always had this idea of like I wasn't gonna make it. And like, you know, they had their own doubts because of their own upbringings, their self-limited beliefs. And they were just like, you need to conform because how are you supposed to make it in this society? And I was always this like stubborn-headed person that said, no, I'm gonna do what I want to do. And I don't care if I fail and I fall down 10 times, I'm gonna continue living my truth. And me living my truth allowed me to get to these milestones in my life. And like that was a really big one for my grandmother to be able to see me on television. Um, and so yeah, I owe my life to them, you know, and I'm grateful for them. And yeah, they are what grounds me.
Thank you. That was very compelling. Uh, I also had some more questions, but I guess I can get into that later. Some things I would like to touch on. I did have a question for you, Preston. Should I go down the line with each person of every question, or one question, number one with everyone, number two with everyone? How should I do that?
Yeah, I think that everyone can answer that. There can also be like a natural flow too. Like I've already been speaking a lot, so this is a moment for me to like step back. Um, yeah, I think that everyone, if anyone else feels like compelled to speak on that, or if a couple people want to, there's not like a set, not set in stone. If everyone would like to, everyone can. If, two or three people want to speak about things that ground them, that's okay too.
Okay, perfect. I'll
Much
just
more like chill community vibes than like regimented. Yeah, we can flow a little bit.
I just wanted to clarify. Thank you. It's interesting too, Lana, when you were speaking about your work as an actress. The first thing that popped into my mind was I've been reading a lot on visibility without protection and representation, kind of like centering trans folks, and obviously we're becoming more visible, and our presence is becoming more known, and the normalization is great. That's definitely something we want, but there's like a downside to that, and the downside is that we're not always protected, and we're so often targeted. And I think I guess I was just kind of curious how you felt about being so visible at that point in time as a trans person.
Yeah, thank you for elaborating on that. Yeah, I think there's so many quotes that run through my head. But I will say that, yeah, with a lot of the visibility comes a lot of good attention and negative attention. And we really need our allies to be accomplices and to stand with us, stand next to us, stand in front of us, be that front guard in line, because there's more of them than there are us. And there's a quote from Malcolm X where he says, and this I think was in 1964, and he was like, the most disrespected person in America is the Black woman. The most neglected person in America is the Black woman. And there's one more quote. But I think even in this day and age, it still rings true. And I would go and say that it's actually the Black trans woman at this time that is neglected, that is disrespected, that is not protected, right? So when we have this visibility, it's incredible for us to get out there and rewrite the narrative, because back in the day it was Maury, you know, it was like people were saying that's a man, Maury, or Jerry Springer, people snatching a wig off, or you were on Cops, getting arrested for prostitution. And now we're in a place where we finally can kind of redirect the narrative. We had Laverne Cox on Orange is the New Black. We're now in a place where, we're no longer relegated to just being the sex kitten, like mistress, like Candace Kane and Dirty Sexy Money. But we have someone like MJ Rodriguez, who's on the show Loot, and she is playing this girl boss, and there's no talk about her gender journey at all. I think she's playing a cisgender woman, and I think that's incredible. So there's some good things about it, but then there's also some negative aspects where, yeah, we're out there, we're visible, and we're under scrutiny, and we can be like prone to attacks. And when that happens, who is going to be there for us? Who is going to make sure that we're taken care of? And I think I had a moment 2 years ago, um, where I felt that, and I was navigating a whole situation with like housing and stuff. And I had a partner at the time, a cis male partner, and I felt like he just kind of dropped the ball. And a lot of the men in my life at that time just kind of dropped the ball when I needed them and when I had to like figure stuff out for myself. And it was really my community that came together and rallied for me. It was Anjali Didi, my amazing big sister, Anjali Remy. It was a lot of folks in the TGNCI community that came and made sure that I was good. And I'm grateful for that community. But it can't just be us, right? We also need our allies to be with us too. So I think that was a moment I had like a dark night of the soul, and I like went into the void for like a good month, and I was like radio silent. I wasn't on social media, and I was just like, I need some time for myself because I see that I really am all that I have in that moment. And like the people in my circle, all of them aren't also in my corner. And I started to realize how important it is to make sure the people in your circle are also in your corner, because you need people who are going to be there for you in your darkest moments or when you need that protection. Um, so yeah, the representation is wonderful, it's beautiful, but it leaves us open for scrutiny sometimes. And sometimes the most represented person can fall prey to a lot of things. And so, yeah, I'm definitely grateful for community, for these spaces, but we have to continue to spread that love and that protection to make sure that like we're really felt and we're really being held and seen.
Thank you so much for that. I think the conclusion too is that while the representation is necessary in some cases, it's a layered discussion, right? Because yes, obviously the visibility has its pros, but there's always also the cons. And I think at the end of the day, even you brought it back full circle in your response, acknowledging that collaborating with other communities in despair and other oppressive groups, and connecting with community, really empathizing with each other and hearing each other and seeing each other is where the liberation is going to ultimately come from. So thank you for that. Let's move on to the next question. So when we're talking about mixedness and transness, how do y'all feel about the intersections within yourself and your life and the parallels between mixedness and transness, if you feel that there are parallels that exist between the two? And any of the panelists are welcome to chime in and give a response.
I'll go ahead and hit that one. So I talk a lot, and Militantly Mixed initially started out predominantly as a mixed space for multiracial, mixed, multi-ethnic, multicultural people, however people identified. And when the show started, there were no other mixed race podcasts. There were some dead podcasts from previous years, but between the time that the last podcast about anything having to do with a mixed person and my show launched was about a year. And so from then, it took months until others started to pop up. And that was also kind of before there were like Instagram channels or Instagram pages that were dedicated to mixedness. There were some Facebook groups that were mixed, but they were like light-skinned babies and, the problematic, the problematic versions of mixedness. And so for me, I felt this huge gap of existing in your full, like I said, be your mixed as self, existing in your full mixed picture. And growing up, there was just so much about me. Like, I use the word hybrid. It's a word that's comfortable for me. I know it doesn't fit for everybody, but in my hybridness, I was literally all the things at all the times. And I didn't have the language to talk about it. So I was trying to form a language when in starting this show and communicating with other people and finding a way to start talking about these things. And through that process, and it took almost like 3 to 4 years of doing the show before I started to attach the mixedness and what I was experiencing in my gender expansiveness. You know, I said earlier, as a child, I described myself like that was the words I was using as a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 year old. I would say I'm a boy girl. And, my family would kind of laugh it off and things like that. And I could kind of slip in to my boyness sometimes because my Japanese grandmother, because English was her second language, would call me he all the time and call my brother she all the time because pronouns don't cross over from Japanese to English the same. And so I got to sometimes feel like someone was acknowledging my boyness, even if it was only by accident. And as I started to grow into being the auntie of mixedness and with my show and everything like that, I started to see the parallels of what was happening to me throughout my life and sort of my gender identity in what was happening to me in my mixed identity. When I was growing up in Long Beach, I was Black. I was weekend Japanese, meaning I could be Japanese when I was at home with my grandma on the weekends, but when I was with my main lived family, I was Black. I was culturally Black. And Black people this was a time when Black people accepted the one drop as, if you're even a little bit Black, you're all Black. That still kind of exists in sort of my generation and up, but in the younger generation, that's starting to go away because there is this thing about presentation and how you maneuver. And, like you were saying, Mariah, earlier about your mother being a white passing. We're playing with the term white passing person of color because they're in the show, because there is something to them having slightly a different experience because of cultural identity, but where their presentation is important, we cannot ignore our presentation and how we can move around community spaces or non-community spaces in whatever we got going on. And so for me, I could exist as a Black person until I was about 38. And then suddenly I had to start being a mixed person because people who didn't understand what communities I came from needed to understand how I was, I guess, because of the hybridness of my face. I mean, Dominicans will claim me violently, but I'm not Dominican. So I would have to find a way to say, I'm Black, Japanese, British American, and my cultural identity is Black, but this is what I got going on. So I became a mixed person in my late 30s. As a gender expansive person, that was hitting around 40, 42 kind of a thing. I'm 46 now. And what it was telling me was in mixedness, you go through these phases. You go through your pick one, you have to represent one or the other. You go through your, I'm going to sample all this kind of stuff. And this is just because of what society is sort of doing to you. It's sort of making you funnel yourself into these positions. So whether or not you're doing it to yourself is probably has a lot more to do with what society is doing to you. And I think gender does the same thing. Whatever bodies that we're born in, whatever language we want to use, the way we're raised and the way we're reared within the body that we are born in impacts whether or not we're allowed to dabble in this sort of fluidity of our gender. You get to called a tomboy if you're femme presenting just because you're a little bit not feminine. I was never a feminine femme. I prefer the term femme to girl or woman in as it relates to me. And I always sort of have, but I couldn't voice it because I didn't come from a time where you call yourself a femme and not be looked at suspiciously. But the same types of dabbling that existed in me as a mixed person growing up, trying to figure out who I was within my mixedness, has exactly mirrored in my both my queerness and my gender expansiveness. There's just times when I'm like, this is the male, the masculine is strong and heavy in me today, and so this is what you're getting. But if you're viewing me as a femme, we got problems with how you're allowing me to be in the space with you. And so I had to really work on fighting against, you're not dictating what's going on here. I'm dictating it to you. What you decide is if you're comfortable being in a room with me. And so I grant people permission to be outside of the room with me, from me, if they're not comfortable with how I'm expressing. So I feel like within mixedness and transness, you have to do the same things. Like if you, let's say you are a white presenting or any ethnic group presenting person, but your cultural identity doesn't necessarily match your presentation, you have to tell people, I'm allowing you to exit the room if you're not comfortable with how I'm maneuvering. That being said, there's way more nuance when it's a white presenting mixed person, because they can turn off the switch whenever they want, and the rest of us can't. I'm technically half white. Where am I going being a white person? It's never going to happen for me. So I'm not going to be able to own that space. So I will instead own my Welsh and English cultural aspects, because that's something that I can do, but I can't maneuver as a white British person. I can't do that. So I would say that where the mixedness and the transness relate, it's the phases that you go through in you're becoming your person. You go through identity phases so often throughout your life of, first when you're a kid, you're trying to grasp at what does it mean to be a gendered person. Once you're a teen, you're going through, who am I as an individual? Once you're an adult, you're like, now I need to figure out my adultness, and it keeps going. I'm middle-aged now. I'm stepping into my granddad phase. I cannot wait until the outside reflects the granddad that I am on the inside, but I can't be accepted at that yet because of how I look. Black don't crack, Asian don't raisin. So we have to sit there and go through these phases all the time. And I find I'm doing double duty because I'm doing it on gender and I'm doing it on ethnicity all the time. So we just have to make spaces that allow the fluidity and meet people where they are in the moment. Because like, I would go back to the white presenting thing just because it happens so often on my show. Where I am a grumpy cat. My housemate is telling, yeah, I'm a grumpy indoor cat. That's my vibe. Where the white presenting thing happens in mixedness a lot is, they're clawing for an acceptance of the visual that they're never going to have. The problem is how long it takes them to accept that the visual is not going to allow them to take up space of colorness and of, in mixedness in quite the same way that a lot of us brown mixed folks have. I don't know if that's a privilege of brownness that we have in this space or whatever that white presenting mixed folks don't have. But yeah, it's a phase. There's phases. You got to work through it until you can finally identify matching what your presentation's doing, what your cultural history is telling you, and who you get to be, who you've decided, not other people giving you permission, but who you get to be because you've finally given yourself permission. I hope that
Thank you.
answers.
Oh no, you definitely nailed it. I feel like everything you were saying, I wanted to kind of amplify and add on and relate, especially to the aspect of just the pressures of society when it comes to gender and also when, especially in the Black community, I feel like it's just like with that whole one drop thing. I feel like that's like pushing you to be a certain way, right? It's just like, well, you have this, so I expect this of you. And it's just like, well, that's your problem, not mine. I feel like too, when you come from a multicultural or bicultural, diverse kind of upbringing and background, both cultural and ethnically as well, it contributes to who you are, right? So you become this layered person, and you become someone who has different you have many parts, right? And so I just feel like when you spoke about acknowledging your mixedness in adulthood and really owning that and claiming that, that resonated with me. Because you just come to a point when you realize, okay, I shouldn't have to just you know, assign myself to one box or the other. I am made up of many different things. I want to claim all of those things, and we'll get into that later. But I just feel like, yeah, it was beautifully said, and I related to a lot of those things.
I would like to add to that it's okay if you have one primary identity without
Right.
necessarily saying the rest isn't there, because sometimes that's about access, right? Like, for a long time I only had access to Blackness, so Black was my main thing, and I liked being accepted in Blackness. Once I started to not be accepted in it, outside of the Black community, then I needed to start looking into my full picture, and that was comfortable for me at the time. But when you're sitting in your one primary identity, you don't have to feel bad about yourself. You just got to work through it. You got to work through, like, I'm a Black Asian. I'm predominantly culturally a Black person, though. I know that the outside doesn't match. So I will include mixed as the way I describe myself to you, so that you can interact with me a little cleaner, versus staring at me for 15 minutes trying to figure out what else is going on with me. You know what I'm saying? So it's everything is a phase. I would say everything is a phase. You got to go through them. And sometimes you can backtrack. Sometimes you got to slide back a few notches to get back to where you are. And I think the same thing happens, because I'm polyamorous as well. Sometimes when I'm with a male partner, the femme starts coming out in a way that makes me really uncomfortable. But when I'm with a female partner, the masculine comes in very strong, and I don't feel uncomfortable in that. I don't have an answer to that question. It just, it's just like, what's going on with me at the time. So I think that's the same thing with you got to work through those phases.
Absolutely.
or sit in it comfortably for however long you need to,
I can relate to that, especially when you were just speaking about the gender, the different traits creeping up at whatever time and feeling a certain way about them. I know at the beginning of my transition, I thought that I had to suppress anything masculine that would try to peek out, and then I got to a point and I was just like, this isn't like making me miserable or anything. And like, this is just organically a part of me. I'm not like, I feel like if I'm not going out of my way to act a certain way or enjoy something, whether or not it's masculine or feminine, I have kind of like, and I'm speaking for myself only, I kind of just let it ride, because I'm just like, okay, I might not shave my legs today because I just don't fucking feel like it, and it's time consuming and it's exhausting. Um, or maybe with my boyfriend, sometimes I want to be a little more dominant, sometimes I want to hold the door for him, sometimes I want to pay, and sometimes I want to like be the big spoon or whatever. And I used to like hyper focus on those things because I'm like, but I'm a girl and blah blah blah, and it's like, okay girl, you're still a girl and that's fine, and you're a different kind of girl, and like, you know that's fine too, and like, it doesn't, none of these things take away from my uh, authenticity or my identity or any of that. It's just, it's a layer of me. It's a part of me, and it's fine. And I think it takes a minute to get to that level and just like kind of embrace all of yourself. But I think it goes too with the mixedness too. I grew up influenced by certain cultures that were not Black. Like, I wasn't surrounded by a lot of Black culture, and I was rejected in a lot of Black spaces, and I've been bullied by a lot of Black people, and so for a while I had a really bad attitude towards my community, and then I just kind of realized, it is important to articulate your background and who you are, and kind of just advocate for your identity and how you want to express yourself, because sometimes that makes the navigation a little more smoother when you're understood. Um, And you had mentioned a couple other things being perceived different ways, and by Dominicans, and you were accepted by Dominicans. Correct me if I'm wrong. You said something like that. I visited Puerto Rico not too long ago, and it's crazy because I don't have any Puerto Rican background, but I felt so at home there because the people were just treating me like one of them, and I was being mistaken and all this stuff. But I felt so embraced and so at home. And I feel like sometimes we just do feel at home in other cultures. And that doesn't mean we're denying any parts of ourselves. It just means that we've been, when you've faced like experienced being excluded and bullied and rejected, and it's nice to be in spaces where you feel embraced. But so that just me relating to a couple of things you said. I'm going to move on to one of the other questions regarding friendship.
I think Nick in the audience. Sorry,
Oh,
I don't mean to cut you off, Mariah. I think Nick in the audience had their hand raised. I don't know if they wanted to contribute something or they had a question. It's
thank
definitely
you.
open style. So as long as people are being kind and raising their hand, please feel free to like raise your hand or contribute something. Did you want to speak for a second, Nick?
Yeah, we can ask questions. That's okay. We could ask
Yeah,
questions.
that's fine. I'm sorry. I did.
Oh,
There's a lot of people on the screen, and I missed your hand. I apologize for that.
oh no, it's cool. I wanted to ask Charmaine Fury. It sounded like, and I think it's also like a little bit of this similar commentary from Lana Patel's testimony as well. That the search seems to. It's like almost as if the world starts off very big in the beginning of your journey, and then it's almost like you have to curate the world in order to be your fullest self. And so in a sense, it's like the search is more for a world that is accepting of your entire self, and it becomes smaller as you become fuller or more expansive in that's how and I really appreciated the timeline you gave, because it was wonderful, you know. But I'm just wondering, is that an accurate, not accurate, but uh, is that sort of what went on, or
Yeah, I would think that like even though we're all individuals and we go through things differently, there are just some fundamental phases that we kind of track through, and I think it has a lot to do with like age, you know, and periods of life, change of life, puberty, all those types of things. So yeah, I do think phases are, for me, that's a good word to use. And but what I think it comes from, if I'm gonna get a little foo-foo for it, a lot of us come from tribal people. A lot of us come from the village. And it wasn't until pretty much white people got on boats that our villages started to break up. And so as you know, people in like the Western societies and things like now, I think we're craving the village so bad. That's why we end up in community work. That's why we end up in activism, is because we have this like gaping hole of the village. You know, it's not just that your mom and dad raises you, it's that your aunties and your uncles and your mama's best friend and you know, all that kind of stuff. That's why Black folks in particular, and I'm sure in other cultures too, call each other cousins, because we don't know we're not, you know, they stole us. We don't know we're not related, you know. So I think as we are, when you're first trying to, like you said, the world is really big. When you're first trying to figure out what your identity is, you're also trying to figure out your core identity. You don't realize your identity is going to shift many times throughout your life, that different, you know, traumatic events or you know, changes in trends and cultures will start to like fundamentally change you. You don't realize that when you're 13 just trying to figure out who you are. And yes, the world feels very big, but as you get older and you start to crystallize the thought of who you are, you're going back to the village. You're trying to find your village. That's why we're on Transpire right now. We're looking to talk to mixed trans folks, very specific and very niche. But is there one of us here that doesn't feel like we need that? You know, I can maneuver any mixed space and be comfortably in my mixedness. But what's missing, if in conversations sometimes, will be my gender identity, will be my sexual orientation, stuff like that. You know, that's why I say be your mixed as self or be your fill in the blank as self, because you're looking to be your full picture at any time in any space that you feel comfortable being that person. And so, yeah, I think the world starts big and it goes small because we are trying to go back to the village.
Thank you. That was beautifully said. Was that all, Nick? Did you have anything else to contribute or any other questions that you had?
No, that's wonderful. Thank you so much.
There's so much I want to say, but I'm going to move on to the next question. I do want every panelist to feel heard, and one of my main goals in this space was to take notes as you all were responding and kind of relate and contribute to your responses. And I'm finding it a little more difficult than I thought it would be, just because time and different things, and just making sure I'm staying on top of the outline. But I do want you to know that you're heard, and there's a million things I want to say to all of you. Like, I would love to have more discourse with all of you and engage more. Also, I can't wait to listen to the podcast. So the next question is surrounding friendship.
Actually, I wanted to backtrack a little bit. I'm sorry, Maria. Just to see if anyone wanted to answer questions 2 and 3 before we move on. Just wanted to see if anyone wanted to speak on those questions, and we can enter them in the chat again.
Oh, okay, my bad. I thought I said, did anyone have any more questions? Maybe you guys didn't hear me.
You can also just speak, Rihanna, too. I think that it is not, depending if you're on a phone or laptop, you can't see everyone. So I'm happy to like verbalize if someone has their hand raised. You can also just speak into the space as long as you're generally not, interrupting the middle of something. You're good to just like speak if you want to share something.
Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, I was a little worried. I was like, oh, I don't want to accidentally like interrupt the flow, but thank you for that, Preston. I saw T in the chat, or T had also said that they wanted more people to respond to 2 and 3. I can touch a little bit on both. I can give like my brief kind of where I'm at with that, because I really like these questions. They're very thoughtful and they really like struck a chord with me. I really like the way that they propel my thought process and like make me feel when I think about the answers. So as for what and who currently like grounds me in this world, in everything that I do and everything that I stand for, there's so many answers, it feels like, for me. But if I had to pick a few, it would definitely be my community that I've built with my own 2 hands, my little ragtag group of people that I've gathered and collected, my friends, and then also my partner, my lovely partner who was here earlier, Sham. Truly, out here in California, it was really hard coming here not knowing anybody. And especially coming from a place where I really didn't feel seen already. I have my group back home, still small and still just as great, but they couldn't come out here with me, and it was very isolating. So it was good to start from scratch almost, but it was also really bad because it's just hard when you have to navigate a whole area that you don't know without anybody. But my partner and my friends have been so instrumental in like how I've navigated everything, helped me when things have been rough, because taking care of yourself after moving across the country is not easy. But yeah, and the way that they perceive the world and their perspectives that they share with me, like have helped me in my advocacy work as well, because some people just know more than you, and when you're trying to learn, it's great to just talk to people who are like, oh, you want to do this? Here, you can do this, you can set this up, you can do this like this. It's so helpful. And that, like, truly, I don't think I could have a million flowers and I still wouldn't have enough to give them. I love them so much and I appreciate them that much. But in addition to my friends, my chosen family and my partner, I also have been recently doing more self-reflection with my my blood family, my actual family. And I found that, you know, my ancestors, I've been trying to do connection with them because I didn't have that connection growing up. It was, I grew up, for context, my identity, I am mixed biracial. I prefer mixed, but biracial, some people will say, black and white, the true and tried classic. Um, and I grew up in that white area, surrounded by my white family, or well, it was not surrounded by, 'cause my family is pretty small, but just mainly around my white family. And my father's family, the black side, my grandparents are and were Guyanese immigrants, African Guyanese descent. And they came over in the 60s and raised my uncle and my dad throughout the civil rights movement and everything after that. So I've been really trying to channel their their energy into things that I do, especially that of my late grandmother. She passed when I was 9, and my father would always tell me growing up how much of a force of nature she was. But the few interactions that I had with her growing up, I mean, at least to me as a child, didn't really match up with that in the good way, where she was just so sweet and so like just the unconditional love I felt, like truly, like I don't think I haven't felt anything like that since. And since, you know, she's been gone for so long and I didn't really get to know her that well, and with the work that I've been doing with my identity and exploring that side as much as I can, with the lack of any sort of written record or resources to try and, you know, put a name to an identity or try and reclaim that culture that might have been taken. I've really been appreciative of what she's, her impact and her legacy in my family has had on me. So, love my Nana. I miss her a lot. And then for number 3, I think the parallel between mixedness and transness, and this is a newer, I think, development to me personally, because I just got out here. It's really, it's so hard doing all this identity work at once when you're finally like, boom, free to be yourself, or it's safe to be yourself. It's safe to explore that. I kind of, I like being in social justice advocacy, especially like around like young people and on college campuses. A lot of the time it's kind of angled towards a general like social justice lens. And there's always a few things you need to keep in mind when you're in those spaces, like kind of doing that sort of work strictly in the context of college campuses, because kind of the way that that sort of work is done isn't really like, it's kind of a sort of watered down version of social justice, because it's the institutional version of social justice. It's like, oh, here's what we're committed to in the name of like equity, like DEI initiatives and stuff like that. It's kind of like they're meeting that quota. So, and then institutionally and, admin wise, there's only so much that you can do before they're like, oh, wait, this is a little too much. This is a little too radical. You can't be doing all that. But it's with intersectionality, that's something that, a lot of the times, at least in the work that I've been doing here, is like, it's like, oh, it's good to bring this up. This will like check those boxes for the social justice work for the campus. I thought like, okay, intersectionality, you can view it visually kind of as like a literal intersection, like a road or just 2 lines crossing. And then kind of how I like to picture it is like, the more at like kind of intersections there are, it's like kind of turns into a grid, right? And you can view like those identities in boxes, and like certain identities can take up more boxes on that grid of intersectionality. With mixedness, that group of boxes formed by that grid of intersectionality might be a lot smaller, because there's either 2 uncommon identities kind of, intersecting, or there's just not a lot of people part of like, more common intersectionality mixing. There's not a lot of people like that. But when you add gender and queerness, I feel like that grid of intersectionality becomes a 3D object where you're just fully stretched away from that, kind of 2-dimensional like descriptor of like, what is your identity? What boxes do you fit into? Now you're floating in space. And that's kind of how I feel with, like mixedness and transness kind of being like, I'm not really sure how to phrase it, just like existing in a space with each other. And it's hard because it's hard to find community that way. When you're doing your identity journey and your gender journey, you'll try and find those groups. It's like, oh, I belong to this identity. Like I'm non-binary, like, trans mass. It's like, okay, so I'll go seek out other non-binary trans mass people. It's like, well, wait, it's like you can't bring your full self because it's like, oh, you're, a person of color. You're not white passing. It's like, or, you go to a cultural space or like a racial space, like, oh, I'm Caribbean. If I were to go to like a Caribbean space and try and bring my full self, I don't think that would go too well. Unfortunately, there's a lot of homophobia and transphobia in the community, absolutely rampant. So it's really hard to navigate those identities, those intersections when it feels like you're forced to claw your way up that three-dimensional object back to that two-dimensional grid where maybe monoracial people might exist, or white queer and trans people might exist in their groups and their boxes. So that's kind of how I visualize it. Might be a little different than in a parallel, since it's more like perpendicular, but that to me is how I understand those intersections. And people that I've explained that to, they thought it was very interesting, so I thought I would share that view that I had.
Thank you for that. Did you want to say anything else? I just want to make sure that I didn't cut you off or anything.
I think I covered everything. I appreciate the opportunity for space. I got everything.
I appreciate your contribution. Did anyone else have anything else to add? I'm going to go ahead and move forward, if that's okay. Just want to be sure. It's so tough to like push forward because the conversations are so compelling, and I just like, I'm like losing my thought in the midst of the people's response, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna forget. And I get so eager and I want to, relate, but okay, let's see. So when we're talking about friendship, I know that can be tricky, finding organic friendships these days, especially as a trans person, especially as a multiracial person or a biracial person. All of these contributing factors can affect how we maintain friendships, find friendships, navigate friendships. And let's see. So, what are the qualities of your friendships? And could you share some nuances or experiences with building connection and friendship? I know
I want to do a quick check-in with folks. I had my hand raised for that, not to speak or answer the question. It time-wise is scheduled to be a bathroom break or just like rest break for folks. So I want to name that really quickly, or just do a check-in. If we got a couple options. Like I said earlier, I love consent and I love giving people options. So our options are, we can pause and do like a quick maybe 10-minute break now. Another option would be to do a brief pause, maybe do like a 5-minute kind of stretch, water, bathroom break, and then do another like 5-minute break a little later. Do people want to like maybe do option 1 is a longer break, option 2, 2 shorter breaks? Do people want to like put up a finger or maybe put in the chat? Longer break. One vote for longer break. What else we got? What else we got? Okay, Shay said they're in it to win it. Shay is here for the whole time. Charmaine is flexible, coming in with the fluidity and flexibility that we all need. What else we got? What else we got? Watching the chat, watching the chat. What do we got? Sounds good. Break time. Okay, cool. So consensus seems to be break time. We'll do like a perfect 10-minute break. Let's come back. Short 10-minute break. Serious topics to resume in 10. Okay, cool. So we'll do the 10. Should be 105 wherever you are. Maybe if you're in a different time zone, will be a different time for you. 10 minutes. If we want to meet back here, please go take care of yourself. Take a couple deep breaths. Go do whatever you would like to do for yourself. Take care of your body. See you soon, friends. Hi, everyone. Welcome back if you're here. Also, take your time coming back if you're not here. Hope everyone enjoyed a couple minutes to stretch or grab something to drink or go to the restroom. And just on the back end too, to let everyone know, Maria sent me a text that they were going to just take a few moments offline to take care of themselves. So I will like moderate for a moment or a few moments until they're back online with us. But just wanted to be transparent about that. They are she's going and taking care of herself. So yeah, I'll give everyone a moment to kind of trickle back in. This last part will also be a little more fluid. The first kind of half was a little more structured. We really wanted to specifically focus on panelists and like hearing different perspective and insight. And the second half is the community discussion. So this is, like I said, just a little more fluid and open. We'll still generally kind of keep the same format. We'll ask a question, have maybe a question in the chat just for people, give us some inspiration or something to think on. And then honestly, this part is usually pretty intuitive. Generally, people flow pretty naturally. And there's just naturally people will just kind of talk. And it seems like this group, people are comfortable chatting and comfortable connecting with each other. So it shouldn't be a problem. Thanks so much for joining us, Joanna. Glad you were here. I think there's some other folks too. I guess maybe some people left, some people will rejoin. So again, just we'll give some fluidity in that as well. Maybe some people, are still grabbing a little snack or something. So Mariah was saying right before the break, was talking about this idea of friendship and like how do these multiple identities and intersectional identities show up in the way that not only we relate to ourselves and relate to community, but relate in platonic friendship and romantic relationship and other forms of relationship as well. I personally am very passionate about not focusing on romantic relationships, but instead focusing all on other nourishing relationships in our lives, like platonic intimacy, like family relationships, like relationships with siblings and with community members that doesn't have to just be focused on the person that you love or the person that you're romantically involved with. Yeah, and the exact question is in the chat, just to reiterate, what are the qualities of your friendship? Could you share some nuances or experiences with building connection in friendship?
I think for me, platonic friendships kind of have to be, how am I gonna say this? Like, I believe in romantic platonic, where like I want to be very giving, or things that I associate with sort of romantic behaviors, like, giving gifts or working within what, I guess, I don't love the term love languages, but whatever that is, the thing that somebody really thrives if they're complimented, or if they're enjoyed gifts or something like that. Like, I like to do that in my platonic relationships. And right now I'm finding that one of the things I didn't say earlier, but it's in my bio at least, is I was recently I lost my husband recently, and I found that like that affected relationships. Like, there's people who are just not in my life anymore because I don't know if they know how to handle it, or they don't know how to handle me in my grief. That's why I'm bringing grief to the table. But I have Jeff and Shay who brought me into their home because I didn't have a place to be. And so like there's no better expression of love to a person than to really be able to take care of them in their grief.
which I'm so lucky that I have in this relationship that I have with these two. And how it's affected, my cat is scratching at me because I'm crying. How it's affected like my other friendships and my other relationships too is just like I was already finding that my world was becoming smaller because the more vocal I become about race and identity or queerness or any of my intersections, the more I can see where people can't live in it. They can't accept it. So I invite you to leave if you cannot handle me at what I am, you know, or where I'm coming from. And grief, there's that in grief as well. People I didn't expect to be present are present now, and people that I expected to be there, I haven't heard, you know, one or two words from. So I think in how as I was saying earlier about like mixedness and transness, as you're getting through your identity, you kind of your world becomes smaller. You're trying to return to the village. I feel like that is the same with the kind of relationships I have. Is that um, I don't know how to like if you don't meet these qualifications, you're not racist, you're not sexist, you're not ageist, you're not ableist, you're not transphobic, you know, whatever. Like you have to not be these things to end up into my circle, and that makes my circle sadly, you know, smaller than I would have expected it to be, given the kind of love that I felt I have shared with certain people. So yeah, like I think now, I think conditional love has a bad rap. You know, everybody strives for this like fantasy of unconditional love, but unconditional love can be abusive. Unconditional love can be dangerous sometimes. Forgiveness can be dangerous sometimes. And I'm not a forgiving person, so that's a protection. That's a very Japanese protection skill that I've learned over my lifetime. So I just feel like the conditions of relationships with me is to be, you know, anti-racist, actively anti-racist, you know, to not vote against your interests or my interests, you know, my survival or the survival of people that I love, you know, things like that. Like there are conditions now to love and to friendship, to be comfortable and to be safe. And if those criteria aren't met, then I either invite myself out or I invite you out, whichever, you know, whichever comes first, I think is important.
Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for being honest. I think that grief is one of those emotions that is so beautiful and so transformative. And unfortunately, we don't create a lot of intentional space for that. And the limited space is usually, like you said, expressed in really unhealthy ways, right? Or like violence is like an appropriate grief emotion, right? Is kind of socially acceptable, but not like talking about it or processing it or just saying, hey friend, I need to just like cry today and be held in that. So thank you for showing up authentically. Thank you for like, yeah, sharing your heart and sharing your life.
Thank you for making space for that, because like I said, it's not available everywhere. So, you know, and I think it's also important not to hide it. Or now that I'm going through what I'm going through, I don't know how to hide it anymore. Like I used to be able to tamp down emotion quite a bit, but I can't do that anymore. And so I'm just not going to do it anymore. The one lesson I'm trying to teach myself is to not apologize for my expression of grief in front of people. So it's hit or miss. Sometimes I'm like, sorry, I'm crying, but I'm not. I'm not sorry I'm crying. I'm not going to be sorry about that. But yeah, we need to learn to make space for our grief, for other people's grief, the whole thing. It's a learning. It's learning across the board, I think, in grief.
Thank you so much. It reminds me too, when you were talking earlier about us living in smaller communities and tribal communities, there was space for that, right? There was space for celebration and also space for the heavy things as well.
Yeah.
And they weren't so separate, right? We like to
Right, yeah.
keep things like in cute little packages now. And it's like, that's not life. Sometimes life
not
is,
life, yeah.
you know, sometimes life is messy, and like that's the fullness of the experience. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you for again like showing up in your fullness today. It's absolutely being received by me. So thank you. Did you are you back? I see a couple of the other panelists are here. Did anyone else want to contribute to the question? Did anyone have like a response for Charmaine? Do we want to move on to the next question? I'll pause for a second.
I'm gonna add a little something. I think friendships are really precious. There's a quote that um I got from this talk show host once, and they had a guest on there, and the guest I think was reunited with her like her kindergarten or grade school teacher as an adult, and her teacher told her that friends are a gift that you give yourself. And I've always kind of lived by that. And I think that my friendships are precious gifts and gems, and that um I will say that, I just really appreciate like the ability to have like chosen family. So yeah, forming friendships with like other queer folks and like trans folks, and especially trans women, I really appreciate like those bonds. And I never got to grow up with like sisters in the same way. Like I have younger sisters, but one is like they're both, I guess, half in a way. Like I have an adopted sister that I think we adopted when I was like 12. So I didn't really get to grow up with her, and she was like 2 years old. And my other sister, I think we're like 5 years apart, but like she grew up on my dad's side, and I didn't really grow up with my dad that much. So didn't really get to have, that bond with her then. We're working on it now, but it's like so nice to have that like sisterly bond now with a lot of trans women. And yeah, I just really appreciate like the magic that is like the sisterhood and like the sibling relationships that I get to have with my queer and like TGNCI siblings. So it's been, yeah, a really beautiful journey.
I just have a quick question for that, Lana, a quick follow-up question. When would you say like in your life that you found your chosen family?
I would say pretty early on, honestly. Like, I mean, like I said, I've been on this journey for 18 years. So it's 18 years of storytelling. But when I was 18, I so I my very first trans friend and chosen family member I met on this forum, and it's kind of crazy because last year I got to meet one of the people that was a part of it, Andrea James. But it was a forum made by Calpurnia Adams, star of the Showtime movie Soldier's Girl. And I don't know if I've gotten to meet her, but I got to meet Andrea James, who was her best friend. And I think Andrea James wrote TS Roadmap. And so that was a really big thing in the beginning of my transition. But the Gender Forum, a Gender Life Forum, was where I met my very first trans sister. And we really connected because we're one of probably the only two younger trans girls, because everybody else were like older trans women in the forum. And um, I think I was like 18 and she was 22, 23. So we're both in college and navigating that while everyone else was like 40s plus. And I was trying to figure out like what it would be like to be on campus and like to live on campus, to like be in a dorm or something as a trans person at that time in Florida. And so she was giving me her experiences like being a trans woman, having to like dorm with like I think she had a dorm with like 4 guys, and she was like navigating her transition, and then she ended up moving out and getting her own place, and she was like dating someone, and there was a whole thing there. But um she became a really close friend of mine, and she actually saved my life in a very dire situation and dark time. Trigger warning. I at the time was like dealing with a lot of adversity with my family. My family was very religious and weaponizing religion. Um, and I just felt very stifled. And like at that point, I had been forced to kind of detransition. My parents found out that I was transitioning. My dad shaved my head bald. My parents told me to get off of hormones. My mom asked me if I was hearing voices, and I'm like, Mom, I am schizophrenic. And my family forced me into cosplaying as a boy for a year. And so I would be a girl outside and I would be a boy in the house. And it was really messing with my mental health and also the religious piece, like being forced into religion. I went through conversion therapy. It was a lot, but I knew at one point that I could no longer take it, and I felt like my life was not my own. Like I felt like a puppet on strings, and that I was being manipulated by everyone around me, and everyone had an idea of who I should be, and I wasn't given the agency to be my own authentic self. And so I knew that for me at the time it was do or die, and I told myself, I can't do this anymore. And I reached out to this chosen sister, my fairy godmother, my big sister, Erica. And she at the time was dating someone in England. I think they were engaged, and she was like, okay, I'm gonna be back. I think like end of May. Let's devise a plan for you to get out of Polk County. You're gonna come to Tallahassee. You're going to transfer schools. You're going to get into Florida State University, where she also was going. And she's like, you're going to start your life over here. And I was like, all right. And so we devised a plan for me to escape. And it was very meticulous because I had a short window of time from when my grandmother would go to New Jersey for the summer to go visit my uncle. And I would just be there with my grandfather. And I knew if my grandfather was home that I could get away. But if my grandmother was there, I would never be able to leave the house. So I had, I think, maybe a week to escape. And my best friend at the time, we were taking summer classes at campus at college. And she'd always be asking me, oh, what are you taking for the next summer class? And I'm like, I'm not taking summer classes here. I'm taking summer class, but I'm not going to take the second part because I'm going to be in Tallahassee. And I would tell her, I'm like, I'm leaving one or two ways. I'm either getting on a bus to go to Tallahassee, or I'm going to leave in a hearse to be put 6 feet under the ground. But I'm not like staying like this. I can't live my life like this anymore. So it was very suicidal. And thankfully, the plan worked out. I sold all of my school books. I think I had like $70 cash on me. I bought a one-way bus ticket to Tallahassee. I had a credit card with $500 on it, and I had a dream to live. And I got on that bus and I went to go see Erica. And at this time, we didn't have Skype. We still have dial-up. I think we just started moving into Wi-Fi, but it was still very much dial-up internet. Um, we, and I put my life in the hands of a stranger, essentially. Like we had talked for probably a good year or so, but I never, saw her in person or got to video chat or anything and verify. But I knew I couldn't stay there anymore, and that I had been given an opportunity to start my life over. And so, her friendship meant everything to me to be able to have a chance to restart my life. And that was the catalyst for change, honestly. Me moving there changed everything. I had this like heart to heart with my grandmother who had been like struggling for the longest, and she was kind of what part of the reason for a lot of the distress that I'd been under. And she was forcing me to wear masculine clothing, to cut my hair, cosplay. And yeah, I think my breaking point with my grandmother at the time was when I was suffering from really bad UTIs, and I had I think it's called hematura, like blood in the urine one day, and she was like, "Come on, we need to go to the to the barber. You have to get your hair cut." And I'm like freaking out because I'm like, "Oh my gosh, it's like blood in the toilet." And I have to run for this appointment, like it was just a lot of stress and trauma that I'd been going through. Um, but to come full circle, we had a really heart to heart conversation when I moved, and I broke down crying. She broke down crying, and she finally understood me where I'm from, and that I was ready to take my life, and like I couldn't live by their rules anymore. And that sent shockwaves to the family, and then went to my stepfather, who is an Afro-Jamaican man, who was probably my biggest adversary. And he turned around and, started becoming more accepting and more open. And yeah, it changed so much for me. So I'm grateful for chosen family. I'm grateful for my sisterhood and like the people in my life that have been there for me. And, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Erica, if it wasn't for so many people in my life, so many chosen family members, so many of my like siblings.
Thank you for that share. Thank you, Erica, too. Shout out to Erica wherever you are in the world. I think Mariah is back and is gonna take over, seeing if Brianna is maybe back yet, or if they want to share something, or they can maybe share on the next question. Passing back to Mariah.
Thank you. Sorry, I had to plug my phone in. It was dying. So now it's like laying crazy so that I'm able to plug it in. Forgive me, where did we leave off? Number 5?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. How have your experiences of belonging, how have you experienced belonging, and how would you like for this generation and beyond of youth and elders to experience belonging and support? What does belonging and support look like and feel like to you as a young adult, young elder, or elder? I feel like I have a million things to say to that. Anyone want to dive into that?
I want to make sure that I make space for the other presenters too, but I'll speak if there's a void.
Go for it.
I think one of the things that I've said about mixedness a lot, and I think it would fit for gender identity as well, is that as a child, if just somebody had acknowledged certain things that I was saying about my experiences instead of telling me, you like to trying to force me or cajole me into fitting in some way, shape, or form, that would have made such a huge difference in me attaining the identity that I was trying to grasp at, as a young kid or as a teenager. And so I think as I like the term young elder. I haven't heard that before, so I'll go with that one. As a young elder, a sir auntie who, wants to help the mixed babies, the biggest thing that I try to do is just listen and also validate. It was an accident of becoming the mixed podcaster in the beginning that I was granting permission to people to experience, to like be their mixed ass selves. That wasn't something I expected would happen, wasn't something I set out to do. It's just that people started hitting up the show to ask me if they could claim being mixed or if they could claim whatever identity group they were a part of, even if they didn't look like it or whatever. And so I found myself having this like undesired responsibility to the community to just be a person to validate them in some way, shape, or form, but also reminding them like, I'm not the person who can validate you. You validate yourself, but if you need somebody to bounce it off of, I'm here. This is something that I try to do. So I think as a young elder in that world, making sure that someone just gets heard as much as possible, and if I feel like someone's going down like maybe a problematic, path in what they're saying, to try to gently roll it back into, well, let's think about it this way or something, like trying to let people go through their journey. Cause I think we all go through our problematic phases where we think something because we're taught by stereotypes or whatever, and it takes us a minute to kind of grow out of them. So I think for that, if I'm kind of answering the questions, it's you need somebody that you view as an authority figure to validate you in some way, shape, or form, because until you get that external validation, you don't work really hard on internal validation. It takes a minute for you to realize that it's ultimately up to you to validate yourself, but you need people along the way to kind of help. And as a sir auntie, I want to be one of those people on the steps to, figuring out your identity if I can, if it's within my area of not expertise, but like as a mixed person, my expertise is my mixedness. And then also I'm a mixed podcaster. As a gender fluid or gender expansive person, it's as a person who went through it too. And so here's what it was like for me. How is it for you? I think these are important things that we should try to offer the community, because most of us come from generations where it wasn't available. I would love to see what Gen Alpha is going to look like when they're 40, because I'm seeing, 5 and 6 year olds owning their trans identity already, and parents that are validating them and, allowing them to exist in that. So I just can't wait to see how amazing of their transitions are going to be, because hopefully they don't have to deal with some of the things that previous generations did. But yeah, trying to be that temporary validator until someone learns how to validate themselves, I think is an important thing as a elder or young elder in this game.
Thank you. I get excited. Someone in the chat said I get excited for the young people. I find that the young people so encouraging, but also other times I'm terrified because we still have young people that are like with the same mentality as like racists and colonizers and just like transphobes, homophobes, all of it still exists in high schoolers and middle schoolers. And so then it's like I'll see like a Gen Z trans person or even like a cis hetero person in Gen Z that's like super like one of our accomplices or allies or whatever you want to say. And then I'm like, yay, and then optimism sets in, and then I'm knocked 3 steps back when I bump into someone who's like a high schooler being like super transphobic, and I'm like, no. But does anyone else have, yeah, it is. Does anyone else have want to contribute to that?
I see Nick's and Rihanna's hands are raised.
Okay, see up here now. Go for it. Nick, go ahead. Thank you, by the way, for pointing that out.
Yeah, thanks for the testimony. It was very moving. On the other side, though, with in terms of the struggle, I think not that to glorify it or anything like that, but I think one of the things I've noticed with a certain generation is because they haven't really struggled for it, there's a certain connection that isn't there and a certain value that isn't there as well. So I'm not glorifying the struggle, but there is something I think you're kind of also in touch with your resilience, like what you're capable of because of the struggle. And I have gratitude for that. Like it's the person who picks up the lint off the floor and the person who's always had the vacuum cleaner, if you get what I mean. Like there's that thing of like you can fix the house without all the accessories. You know what I mean? And it's kind of important to know that you can do that. If you get the accessories, it's great, but it's also good to know. Sometimes I think it's because of the struggle that there's certain things that I will not do, and I'm clear, and I understand the price that needs to be paid, and I'm willing to pay it because of the obstacle. It doesn't come to me. It seems like some generations it's kind of cheap because they don't have that thing that came before. The bloodshed wasn't there, the whatever. I'm not glorifying it, but I'm just saying that to a certain extent there's a lot of marginalized identities. What do we do with the violence? You know what I mean? Like how does it, and it informs so much. So I'm like, there is a value to it, but I'm not saying be violent, but I'm saying like if there is a whatever, I don't know what I'm saying.
There's a righteous rage. Is that what we're saying? No.
Yeah, there is a righteous rage and a righteous and a value
I think,
yeah.
yes, I get what you're saying. And even though I'm going off in another direction a little bit, even with like liberation or any type of liberation in marginalized communities has never been like a peaceful, breezy moment or something. There's going to come a time where things have to, you have to be aggressive and to move forward. Someone else had their hand up too. Were you done, Nick?
Yeah, yeah, you have to like, and also that that you're able to, because you've been through it, you can look it in the eye and you can live in the storm. And I think sometimes when it comes easy, it's like, I'm like, maybe you don't know how strong you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's like you were just saying, it's easier to identify when you've already experienced it, which is beneficial for you in the future. Someone else had their hand up, I think. I don't remember who it was. I'm sorry.
It was me, but I think that I want to hold this space for the previous speakers for this question.
Are you still speaking?
Oh, no, I just wanted to say that I wanted to leave this space for
yeah, I heard
Mana
you.
and Nick and yeah.
Yeah, I'm speaking to the previous speakers. My apologies for that.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah. I think Nick said they were done. I'm going to go ahead and move on if the previous speakers are done. If you have something else to say, feel free and safe to do so. Also, while we're waiting for a brief moment, just to make sure everyone's done, if I have made anyone feel unsafe in any way, shape, or form, I am a fan of being critiqued. If you want to point something out that I'm doing, I will receive it. It was brought to my attention that maybe I should not turn my camera off at all. I was doing that to make myself feel safe at certain aspects and at certain points in time. But just to make everyone aware, I am 1000% present, and I'm even taking notes of certain points that I relate to and want to speak on in the future, whether I reach out to you at another time. And I value every word being spoken. It's very therapeutic for me, and I appreciate everyone who is speaking and sharing their opinions and perspectives and experiences. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. And again, feel free to let me know if the camera thing, if there's any discomfort with that, feel free to let me know. So I'm going to move on. So there's a lot of stuff happening right now politically in the political world, and trans people are at the center of a lot of it, which is, you know, maybe exciting to some, not so exciting all the time, being so visible all the time, in my opinion. The personal is political. In a recent article, how Kamala Harris just gave the nation a masterclass in handling mixed identity policing, mixed advocate Teresa Stovall, I don't know if I said that right, unpacks Donald Trump's statements policing US VP Kamala Harris' mixed race identity as well as her Blackness. In reference to this, Stovall writes, folks of all races routinely police mixed folks. Sorry, there was an extra word in there. I've experienced this, I'm sure you all have on some level or another, where people are like, oh, well, I thought you were this, or I thought you were that, or you have a drop of Black, so you're just Black to me, which a lot of people in the Black community will assign you as being Black if you have a drop of Black, and despite whatever background you might have, that will be disregarded in the Black community. That's my experience. I think it was great what happened with Kamala Harris recently, but more importantly, I want to know your all's opinion on it. So let's see, I don't see any hands up. Did anyone want to contribute?
Again, I want to say that I want to have the other speakers speak, but if anybody's curious about further conversations, Teresa is actually a mixed auntie with Militantly Mixed. So we used to do monthly programming, and we talk about this topic a lot in the catalog. So you can, if it's important to you to hear, we talk about it a lot on the show. But I'm going to go back on mute.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly add, yeah, I have definitely been a victim of policing. I think, at least for myself, and I don't know Vice President Harris, but I'm assuming it might be something similar to her because we have similar genetic makeup. She's also Jamaican and Indian. From what I know she's from Oakland and, Bay Area. I don't know growing up what she identified as, but most people probably saw her and thought she was mixed race or like mixed Black person. And I think for me, growing up, I fought so hard to assimilate because when I grew up in New York, I was like one of many Black and brown folks, and I grew up in Queens. Like I'm born and raised in Queens. So the neighborhoods that I grew up in were all Caribbean. I grew up with Jamaicans, Trinidadians, Guyanese, Panamanians, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, like we were all just like Caribbean folks, Black and brown folks. And then I moved to Polk County, and I am one of 3 Black kids in the whole school, and one of 2 South Asian kids in the whole school. And I'm talking like the whole high school. I think there was like one little girl that was biracial, Black and white, in maybe the elementary school, but for the whole 6 to 12, there were 3 Black children, myself included, and 2 South Asians. And, I went from like being one of many to like being one of few. And I always would say I was a raisin in a rice pot. I always felt like just like this, othered person, and my perception of everything changed once I entered this space where the status quo is white. Like the beauty standard is white, is blonde and blue eye, like blonde hair, blue eyed. It's like, Cameron Diaz and Jennifer Aniston or whoever was like the popular person, Britney Spears and all that. And I, because I like dealt with so much ignorance and like racism in that space, especially with my grandparents, I just wanted to assimilate. So I think I shied away from my culture and my identity for a long time just so that I could blend in with the American people, quote unquote. And I don't think it was until like leaving Florida and moving to California and like not being connected to my family in the same way and like having to figure my life out on my own, where I realized how special and important my culture was and my identity. And then I started to like come back to myself. And then I had a moment where like my paternal grandfather passed away, and that was like a really pivotal moment for me because he and I were very close up until his passing. But the last time he saw me was like the very beginning of my transition, and I never came out to him. And I never went back to New York for that, like for 10 years. So he never got to see the real me. And he like was on his deathbed, like asking for me. And that was really hard because I stayed away from him because I was afraid of rejection. But I like missed out on like what could have been. But when he passed, it was a wake-up call for me to like get rooted back into myself and my culture. And so I started to delve deeper into like my South Asian culture. I started going to temple. I started to like, wear cultural clothing and things like that. And when that happened, I started seeing a shift of how people saw me and dealt with me. And they were like, oh, so now you're Indian. Oh, now like, you want to wear like Indian clothes. Oh, this is your thing now. Like, oh, like you're doing the Bollywood thing. Like I once had like an event in the Bay actually, and I think I was wearing a sari, and I sit down and the guy looks at me and is like, "Oh, so you're doing the Indian thing?" And I'm like, "Uh, okay." But I think so many people like see a person and then they make up in their head their racial and like cultural identities based off of phenotypes. And then they just assume like, okay, I see these phenotypical attributes. You are Black, you are Indian, you are this or that. And what always used to frustrate me was the fact that like they'd always make you pick a side. And it's like, oh, if you look really Indian, then you're just Indian. If you look Black, then you're just Black, right? And then it's like, why do they do this, especially with folks that are like mixed Black, with something other than white? But then a lot of times when I would see my mix like Black and white, folks, if they didn't look, I guess, phenotypically Black, then they allowed them to just be mixed. They didn't force them to be like to pick a side. But yeah, I definitely dealt with a lot of policing and people, trying to figure out why I'm wearing like cultural South Asian clothing or criticizing me for it, or like, oh, now this is the thing, you want to be Indian or whatever. And it's like, oh, I didn't know you were Indian. And I'm just like, yeah, like I grew up in a household like with an Indian grandfather, and this is very much my culture, my identity. But because of the climate at hand, it just one was not a thing for me to do. Like my grandfather was the only Indian person that I knew in the whole county. We did not have a space for like Indians or South Asians. We didn't have grocery stores, restaurants, temples. Um, so it was like, why would I even wear cultural clothing? Like, where am I going with this? And I finally got to a place where I felt comfortable and like expressing that side of myself and honoring my ancestors. But yeah, I'm kind of, weaving it into the whole thing with the vice president, but I can assume that it could be something similar where it's like, oh, you're a Black girl from Oakland. Oh, okay, now you want to be Indian. Oh, now you want to be Black. Obviously, it's a little bit more nuanced because she's trying to get votes and she's gonna work every angle she can. But um, the thing with Trump saying like, oh, she was Indian, now she's Black, and it's like she's both. Like, why do we have to pick a side? Why are they constantly forcing us into a box? We should allow folks to just be.
Totally agree with all of that you were saying. 1000%. Let me check. Make sure there's no hands. Did anyone else want to add to that?
I can add to that a little bit. Lana, I definitely relate with a lot of what you said, just fundamentally based off of experiences. Like growing up in such a like I didn't share the experience of having being one of many. I was always one of few, so I can relate on that aspect. And all I wanted was to assimilate because I was so different to all of these I mean, even though I am half white, I don't look white. I'm brown skinned, and to all the white kids I was around, to all the white parents, I was Black. And it didn't matter what shade I could have been. Like I could have been dark skinned, I could have been light skinned. I was treated as just, oh, I'm like that child is Black. And so it was bad, and I was being bullied at a young age, and I didn't understand why. And so I would like, kids would be at school like, are you Mexican? And I was like, well, oh, I don't know. So I go home and I'm like, well, what am I? And so, my parents or my father would tell me like, oh, you're both. Um, and trying to explain that to all these kids, and then, at the same time, just receiving flack because I look the way I look and I can't change that. So it led to a lot of like resentment and self-hatred because it's like, well, I look this way. It's like, I just need to be like these kids and then I'll be fine. I need to fit in. And so, even though I don't look white, I acted white. I was just, very whitewashed in that way. And not having access to my culture growing up due to a lot of like generational trauma. The era that my dad grew up in was like even less friendly to just to Black Americans in general, and not to mention like Black immigrants. They like just assimilate a little too hard is what I like to say. But in those circumstances, I don't blame him at all, and I don't uh, I don't hold any resentment there. But it was a lot of, like as I got older and I was like leaning more into like it's like, oh, I'm Guyanese, I'm Black. Like, yeah, I want to embrace this more. I didn't have this as a kid, and I'm there was still no people around me because I grew up in the same town for like 18 years of my life. And you know, I'm suddenly reaching into like, you know, this part of my is like, yeah, I'm black, like, you know, I don't look white. So it's like I start saying stuff like, you know, like, oh, like this, just anything. And then, you know, like having any sort of commentary or opinion on anything is just dangerous. I like, God forbid I even be gender nonconforming, which I was. Still wore clothes that affirmed my gender, like traditionally, like boys or men's clothing at, you know, in a high school age, and still outwardly presented as cis, because it wasn't safe for me to do otherwise. There were a few others that um, um, were like uh, decided to do that despite everything, and being like with the intersection of my identities and the flack that I had received already, it wasn't safe for me to do. And I had tried to support my friends and those people, the few people that were brave enough to do that, the best I could throughout that, but it was very hard not being able to do that myself. But once I stepped into that, you know, like, oh, like racial identity and sort of kind of exploring my gender identity and like queerness more, even if it wasn't, even if it was stifled and kind of restricted, like you know, like, it was like, oh, why are you doing that? Like, oh, so now you want to be black? Like now you want to embrace that after acting white all these years? Like even from people that I knew, like my best friend at the time, like I remember this. It was, I think it was like the 4th of July or something, right? And I'm surrounded by these white people like, yeah, America, let's go, guys. I'm like, oh, like, you know, and because I'm scared to kind of step out of the that area of whiteness, that area of being American, kind of was like, oh guys, like what if the country's not that great? And then my best friend at the time had said to me, he was like, oh, well, you should go to Guyana and see how they treat you there. And I was like, oh, okay, that's great. So after that, I kind of just like kind of retracted into myself, and just kept, you know, being that assimilated kid. You know, it's like, all right, I'll figure that stuff out later. I'll figure out my reclaiming my culture. I'll figure out, you know, being black and embracing that part of my identity. I'll just, you know, I'll figure out being queer later. I'll figure out being trans, which I knew at the time but couldn't do. Like, I'll figure that all out later. And that really just completely destroyed my mental health. I was at, like, you know, such a dark place for so long, and I really just did not think I was going to make it out of it. I did. I'm here, but it was a lot of it formed a lot of resentment towards one half of my identity, the only part that I was allowed to have. But then when I would explore, you know, being black, being queer, being trans, you know, it's like, oh, but like you're half white, like, you know, like what's going on here? So what been trying to do, you know, with and along with like accepting that, you know, like, yes, I am half white. I do have that lineage, and that part of my identity. You know, there's such a like rich like pagan culture and history and like all of that with the white side of my family, um, that I can easily embrace and learn about, you know, while acknowledging the harm that could have potentially come from that, you know, the weight of my existence existing like in America as someone who has, you know, one black parent and one white parent, because there is that, you know, kind of additional weight to that, to, you know, having a mixed child with that specific, you know, parentage. So it's been a lot of radical self-acceptance for that part of me, and then a lot of like grieving what I could have had growing up. But then, you know, it's like I still have the rest of my life ahead of me. It's like, who's to say I can't have it now? And nobody can tell me what I am and what I'm not, and what I can step into or what I can't step into that, like, you know, does align with my identities. It's just, you know, I have every right to be Caribbean, to be Guyanese, to be black, to be trans, to be queer. And, you know, people that like, even if I reach out to community, people who I share identities with, and they have a problem with one of those, you know, even though it's like, oh, I'm happy that I finally found a door that's opening to community. If someone's there in that doorway telling me, you know, like, oh, like, but you're half white, or oh, but you're gay, or oh, but you're black, or oh, what you're whatever, it's like, why would I want to go through that door? So that's how it's kind of um, been for me. So yes.
Hey, Oh,
It's been
sorry.
hard. Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's been hard unlearning, but I acknowledge it's a process.
I was creeping in a little too early. I apologize.
It's okay.
I just want to say thank you so much for that response. It was very powerful, and I deeply empathize with you, especially when it comes to, and I'm going to get to you, Sharmane, I see your hand up. Um, I deeply empathize with you, especially when it comes to people trying to dictate your identity and dictate who you are. And oh, well, you don't look this and you don't look that to me, and blah blah blah. And it's just like, what is acting black and acting white? What is looking black and looking white? Like, what is that? It's so stupid. And then it's just like it goes back to how that's why I respect non-binary people so much, because I feel like even though I follow the binary and like I am a whole woman in my mind, I feel like the binary is so toxic and dangerous. And it's the same thing with race. I hope we get to a point where race and gender are not, something that we are so thrilled by or so, like it's just something we don't think about. We just look at the person. Culture is important. I understand that's important to people. I just hope it's not so remarkable in the future, like, oh, you're this or you're that. Okay, cool. Anyways, let's move on. Like, okay, go ahead, Charmaine. I'm sorry. And then we're gonna
No,
move to that next question because we're kind of going over on time.
yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, champion what both Lana and Rihanna said, because this is like both playbooks, the playbook of the mixed kid who becomes a mixed adult and the playbook of the people who are going to try to put us in a box, right? Like both of those things y'all both talked about, the policing your identity, that because I can't put you in a box, now I'm uncomfortable with your existence or something like that. Or even like, no, I can put you in a box, so let me put you in the box and just be the thing that makes me comfortable. And so often across any of our intersections, people on the outside want to make decisions for you. And, I mean, we're all guilty of it in some form or fashion. But, as we start to learn ourselves better and we get more attuned in our intersections, we start to figure out, oh shit, I do that to people too. I need to not do it in this arena, but I'm doing, because I know how it feels in this. I know that we're all guilty of it in some way, shape, or form, but it always amazes me. Like, trust me that I'm telling you what my identity is. Trust me that I'm telling you the cultural background that I have. Don't decide for me, because that's not going to get us anywhere. And also, what's the win? On the outside, what's the win on you putting me into a box, or or something like that? Oh, I have a cousin who I've tried to maintain a relationship with, but it kind of comes and goes because this person cannot understand why I chose to I come out as poly. The mixed stuff, he kind of gets. He's one of my white British cousins. He kind of gets. He's like, all right. He's got an uncle who's also mixed, so he's like, okay, I kind of get that. The queer stuff he's not super great with, but he really took it hard that I came out as poly. And he's like, why couldn't you just hide that from me? But at the time I was living with two partners, and I was like, because at some point you're going to come visit me. And if all these partners are here, I'm not sending one away just to make you comfortable, or just because you met one and you don't know the other. And his whole thing was like, you could have just not told me and we could have just continued on like everything's okay. Well, that's everything's okay for you, but that's not everything's okay for me, because I'm trying to be a whole person and you've just told me I can't be a whole person around you. So what have you told me? You just told me you're not safe for me to be around. And then, that the way that they're shocked by, oh my gosh, what do you mean I'm not safe? And I think you touched on it earlier, Preston, where you said like even a safe space is not necessarily a safe space. I guess we have an example of that's happened today as well. Like, there's just people you love or places that you feel comfortable in or that you're so hopeful about. And then you find out, boom, actually, there's this element. Like, if you can just behave this way, or if you can just present this way, you can be safe. But if you can't,
you're going to have to deal with this. And it's not fair to us. Unfortunately, it's the way that we have to maneuver, but that's why we have to continue to make spaces like this and continue to educate ourselves within those spaces on how to make it safer. Every time you do it, there's a lesson to how to be safer. You know, one of the things that I forget to do often, but I have a friend that does it, and every time I'm in the presence of that friend, I remember, is if I'm on camera to describe what I'm wearing and what I look like, so that for people who are visually impaired, they have an understanding, they can picture me. I didn't do it today, and then I thought about it later, and I was like, fuck, I forgot to do the accessibility thing. You know, we have to always be working and understanding that, you know, we're not perfect at it, but we have to try to do it ourselves. And when someone tries to undermine us, if we can and if we feel safe enough, we have to try to step up and say it for ourselves. And if we can't, that's why I put in the chat, that's when you tag, when it's some nonsense of like, oh, you're trying to be Indian today or things like that, that's when you tag me in. Because that's the job I take. Like, I'll knock a person down for that nonsense, you know. So it's also good. Like Shay, who's in the chat, she's my emotional support white woman. When I got a problematic white woman in my space, that's who I tag, and she goes and gets her person. So if someone wants to come at my cousins and try to tell me that they don't get to be what they are, I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna take care of that too. So I think we have to find our places, our people, our chosen family that's gonna take on those jobs for us, and we're going to do a different job for them so that, you know, everything evens out. But man, hearing what both Rihanna and Lana, what both of you said, like, those are the things, like, I could feel the rage building in me hearing what you're saying, because I'm like, I've done episodes on this. I've talked to countless mixed folks about this. I have over 260 episodes and speaking engagements where people have come to me in person and hit me with, what do I do when someone says this to me? And it just makes me feel like this work is never done. It's never done enough. There's no end to this work. But yeah, as it relates to, I forgot, as it relates to Kamala, whoever said earlier that visibility is a trap, I think the Kamala thing is that right now. Because as much as like you may appreciate her as a mixed woman being present and visible, and it's great for us to see it. And I'm separating her mixedness from her politics. So whatever your politics are, I'm talking about her mixedness right now. It opens up that conversation. Oh, she's trying to be Indian. Oh, she's trying to be Black. Oh, she's pandering. You know, Obama did it too. He spoke with a Southern accent when he was in the South, but he's not American Black. He's African Black. It's a little bit different. He was raised by white people in Indonesia. It's a little bit different. You know, it's a positive, it moves us one step forward and three steps back, I think, to a degree sometimes when we're present, when we're visible. And I'm guilty of being that presence and visibility too. If you don't like something I've said, now you're knocking down all the mixed folks because I said something you didn't enjoy, you know. And I think the Kamala situation is doing that right now. You know, and I want us to have more spaces and more opportunities and leadership and things like that. But the cost in the beginning is risky. It's dangerous for us, and it's scary because you don't want anything to come to harm for her, but that's the risk she's taking on kind of behalf of visible mixed people right now. You know, I don't know. I have feelings about it, but they're separate from this, what we're talking about. So I'll leave that one there.
Thank you. I also want to say, we're all taking that risk, right? Well, especially in in our queerness and our transness, living publicly, and we're all just doing the best we can. We all are carrying trauma. We're all carrying different things. Some of us are neurodivergent. And I think all of these things need to be considered, even when you were speaking about being conscious of maybe people who are hearing impaired or vision impaired, and holding space for them and making them feel comfortable. I think that it's important to acknowledge that even people who might not do those things every single time, or whenever it's not always malicious. You never know what someone's going through, and it doesn't make it right either. But we all need to consciously work, and the work is never done with whatever we're talking about. It's conscious. We're always evolving and growing and working at it and doing our best. I'm going to go to the final question. Future thinking. And it says, how do you foresee shifts happening in terms of representation for mixed and multiracial, trans, and gender expansive people? Where do you believe this change begins? Anyone want to start us off? I would say it begins with us. Right here in this space today. I don't see any hands up. We're being shy.
I want to offer to open this question for everyone. Like anyone that's here today, it's a small enough group. It's the last question. If anyone like hasn't had a chance to speak today, or this question's maybe really on their heart or on their mind, please feel free to discuss. We're a small enough group, we can accommodate for that.
I guess I'll answer this. The question two was supposed to include, hi everybody, my name is B. My pronouns are she, they. I identify as mixed race, brown, indigenous, and white, and I am white assumed. And I am bisexual, pan, and grew up in Inglewood, California, predominantly Black, Latina, brown community. And grew up very poor, working class, child of a Danish immigrant grandmother, Mexican, brown and light skin, Mexican immigrants, of it, all of them of indigenous descent, and North African, Spanish, and even within the Spanish mixed ancestry there too. And I guess for me to answer this question would be is just to acknowledge like three things, which is how do we know what we know? You know, it's one thing to know, it's one thing to know what you know, and then how you came to know what you know. So just honoring that we all have context and that is what was shared today, you know, that we all come to learn race, gender, sexuality, all these big concepts and live them in our bodies very differently. So when we speak over, speak for an experience we don't live, it becomes very violent very easily. Especially if we're not curious about the consciousness that our bodies carry, and that our ancestors, you know, we all are tapped into different ancestors in our waking existence. And then just also acknowledging that how we've come to talk about these things has been very institutionalized, very privileged, you know, academic, nonprofit, middle class, managerial, professional, working class, instead of from the poor, from people who are predominantly, you know, working class, and the consciousness that people have around sexuality and gender and race are very different, and are not honored in those spaces. They're often appropriated, and so I think centering folks who are poor and working class, and we're still very much living in poor working class experience, and obviously there's fluidity in class. We probably all maybe come to realize that even class is not as rigid as race and sexuality. And then also like race, you know, I think there's an assumption that we all experience race the same throughout our day to day. And that we also assume that race is normal and that it's not an act of violence, and it comes with all these different complex contradictions, and that you're not going to experience your whiteness, your blackness, your mixedness, your brownness, your indigeneity in the same way across regions, across geographical locations, language, you know, global, all that stuff. And we try our best to like say there's this, you know, unified experience, especially with white assumed and, you know, white passing, which I think is problematic and outdated term. It belongs in the antebellum South in the Black American community. And passing is also very much gendered in many ways too, that we have to unpack, because it's rooted in survival, right? So it's not rooted in choice. We think it is. But yeah, so just would say that just continue to ask questions, be curious, and center folks who are still, their knowledge, our knowledges are not, they're getting lost in translation, right? So the way we even learn to speak about who we are, we do it in a way to like make sure it's a catch-all and that we don't step on anybody's toes, but we could create spaces where there's a methodology, there's a way that we all honor how we're stepping in, which we kind of mirrored that a little bit today with the community agreements, but just acknowledging that it's going to be messy, and that we're not in the majority mixed race spaces, and we're not in the majority conversations around anti-racism, and we often are influencing behind the scenes major decisions historically. I really do believe there's always been queer and trans, mixed race siblings, cousins, lovers who have influenced revolutionary change throughout history. And it's just about repression and not at all just about how do we add ourselves into the mix. Like we have been at the center of social change in the beginning. And then us having to like fit into normative ways of thinking about race, cis heteronormative things, thinking about Blackness and indigeneity and whiteness is problematic as fuck. And I also think it's problematic to think that white skin is synonymous with a white racial identity, or right or white. We see that in Palestine. We see that with our Swana relatives and our ancestors. Our indigenous ancestors, most indigenous people in the Americas are multiracial, mixed race. So we do have to address colorism and we do have to address featureism, but I think we're trying to fit into these very narrow ways of sharing who we are and our knowledge. And I think we risk recreating the same categories and binaries that we're supposedly trying to free ourselves from.
Thank you for that, especially that last part. I feel like we create these spaces, these safe spaces, and these spaces for marginalized people. And, you know, there's several different groups, several different spaces for different marginalized groups and oppressed groups. And we enter these spaces sometimes and we see the same structures being rebuilt and mimicked, and whether it's like superiority or the colorism coming into the space, or the social status or whatever. I know that I've experienced lots of violence in spaces I shouldn't have experienced violence in activism spaces. And it was very telling for me. It was a learning moment for me. And I think for me, in my opinion, the way we move forward and the way we progress as a people is to completely rid ourselves of these systems and conforming to them and following them and giving life to them and upholding them. Ultimately, I just would like to see a world without, that doesn't have race and gender, or, you know, that's like asking a lot, but you know, if we could even get to where we stop assuming things, you know, stop assuming things like by what it looks like, or, you know, whatever, and actually have a conversation with someone or get to know them and peel off the surface. But yeah, thank you so much for that. response. Did anyone else want to contribute to that? I know we're probably closing out soon. We're at 2:21. Is everybody good? Preston wants to speak.
I was just gonna officially close this out if no one else has anything to say. I'll do like the directions again just so we can like energetically have a nice like clean ending. The same way that we came into the space. We can leave with what we brought into the space and also leave with some new knowledge, some new friends. Anyone else have anything to say or speak on? So this way we'll do backwards. Again, if you want to bring up your compass on your phone, I think it's always nice to look where you are spatially in your world, in your space right now. And I just want to remind everyone what you brought into the space. Everyone named a word and what they were bringing, contributing to the community. Hold that for a minute to yourself. Everyone wants to rub their hands together, feel your energy. Maybe it's a little warm. Maybe your hands are chilly. If you're like me, your palms are maybe a little sweaty. Rub your hands together, just connect to your own energy for a second. We're going to honor that great spirit energy that connects us to ourselves and connects us to one another. Thank you to Mother Earth for grounding us. Thank you for nourishing us with food and your rich soil. Sorry for not walking softly on you. I'm committed to doing better by you, Mother Earth. Thank you, Father Sky. Thank you for all the beautiful birds and clouds and sunshine and even rain. Thank you for that too. And thank you to the direction of north, to all of our benevolent ancestors from all over the world, all of our incredible transcestors that brought us all here together today. Over to the west, thank you for your warm, juicy, wet waters. Thank you for community. Thank you for sharing. And bring it to the south. That fiery passion, that hot, that righteous rage. And to the east, air, thank you. Thank you for reminding us to stay light, to reminding us to move swiftly and sometimes quietly, and sometimes like a tornado. Thank you to east. And then we're going to clap 3 times. Officially closed out the space. Thank you all for being here. I also will open it up for tea if you have any final like announcements or ways folks can connect. There's Instagram in the chat. I know everyone that spoke today is like there and easy to connect with. If anyone would like to connect with any of the panelists, I will pass it over to you, T, if you have any final thoughts for us. Thank you so much, too. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. This was, yeah, so healing for me. Thank you. Thank you.
I want to acknowledge what Ziva shared in the chat. Los Angeles Public Library Zine Club, the bit.ly that Ziva shared. Thank you, definitely. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And also Sharmane shared their Instagram handles on Instagram. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming, for being here. I definitely felt the energy throughout. I know those questions were not like, light. So I just want to honor the depth everyone brought today. Just share gratitude for everyone's vulnerability, openness, and honesty, especially because we have been recording today. And you can definitely continue to stay in touch through Instagram as well as through a Discord. So there's a link in the Instagram bio a link tree link that'll take you to the Discord. So the Discord was created for like everyone who has attended today, everyone who watches the video and who's like seeking community, who's wishing to be in community and just like connect with people and build together and support each other in the advocacy work that we're doing in our communities. And so we could keep in touch through Instagram. We could keep in touch through the Discord. And then I also wanted to share with everyone that I've decided that if Transpire is to continue, that I'd really like us to transition into a mutual aid collective, and really want to invite all the panelists and our moderator as well, and all attendees to join if you're interested in mutual aid for mixed and multiracial, trans and gender expensive people across the state of California, and what that could look like. But I would love to organize with everyone in a non-hierarchical way and step down and make everything, everything horizontal in terms of communication to Transpire, in terms of building community, or like really uplifting and supporting each other, as well as those we haven't met yet. Thank you. Thank you, Ziba. There's more information in the chat if everyone wants to go ahead and save links. I know I will. And I realize I have something else to say. Just to keep in touch around that transition into doing mutual aid work, please feel free to DM the Instagram, and then we can connect on Discord, maybe create a channel and follow up. I know that the recording will be out within a week, and I will connect with Sharmane around when and how to post it. And yeah, I would love to keep in touch with everyone, and thank you again for supporting this community event and resource.
Thanks again so much, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.